Please don't come tomorrow. I won't argue.
I'll remember. Everyone already believes Ryan owns this farm. Belief changes nothing. I own every acre. This farm was never yours to promise.
Mom, please help me.
Before sunrise on the day of her son's wedding, Diane Whitmore sat alone at her kitchen table, polishing the only pair of dress boots she owned when her phone vibrated against the wood. The message came from Ryan, just one sentence. "Mom, Vanessa thinks it's better if you don't come tomorrow." Diane read it once, then twice, then a third time. Less than 12 hours before the wedding, the woman who had raised Ryan, buried his father, and spent 20 years keeping Whitmore Ridge Farm alive had suddenly become someone too embarrassing to be seen. Vanessa's family wanted polished stories and polished people. Diane represented dirt roads, horse barns, and hard work. She didn't cry, she didn't call. Instead, she opened a locked drawer and pulled out a property deed Ryan had apparently never bothered to read. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Before the wedding became a disaster, it had started as one small lie about where Ryan came from. Diane sat motionless for several minutes after reading the message. The old farmhouse was quiet except for the ticking clock above the stove. The words themselves were painful. But what hurt most was how ordinary they sounded. No apology, no explanation, no invitation to discuss it, just a decision that had already been made. Ryan was 42 years old. He was no longer a confused young man making mistakes. He was an adult who had chosen his side. Diane placed the phone face down on the table and stared through the kitchen window. Outside, the first light of morning touched the fences surrounding Whitmore Ridge Farm. The farm wasn't large, it wasn't famous, it wasn't worth millions. But every fence post, every stable, and every acre represented decades of work. She and her late husband Harold had built it together. After Harold died 8 years earlier, many people assumed the farm would eventually disappear. Instead, Diane stayed. She learned things Harold used to handle himself. She managed taxes. She negotiated contracts. She repaired equipment when she had to. The work never stopped. Neither did she. Her gaze shifted toward the locked drawer she had opened. Inside sat several folders containing deeds, tax records, trust documents, and estate papers. Documents most people would find boring. Documents Ryan had never shown much interest in reading. Diane slowly pulled one folder closer. The farm deed remained exactly where it had always been. Her name was on it. Only hers. She closed the folder again. Something about Ryan's message bothered her beyond the obvious insult. It felt connected to other strange moments from the past year. Moments she had ignored because she wanted peace. Now she wasn't so sure. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Vanessa, not an apology, not even an acknowledgement of what had happened. Instead, Vanessa had sent a photo, a picture from the wedding rehearsal venue. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, gold table settings. Underneath the photo was a single message: "Everything looks perfect." Diane stared at it. No mention of the wedding band, no mention of Ryan's text. Nothing. It was almost as if Vanessa expected her to quietly disappear. Diane deleted nothing. Instead, she saved screenshots of both messages. A habit Harold had taught her years ago. When something felt wrong, keep records. Feelings faded. Documents didn't. She placed her phone beside the folder. Then she stood and walked outside. The cool Kentucky air greeted her immediately. The horses were already awake. A chestnut mare approached the fence as Diane crossed the yard. She rubbed the animal's neck and felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Animals never pretended to be something they weren't. People did, especially when money and status entered the picture. When Ryan first met Vanessa 3 years earlier, Diane had tried hard to welcome her. Vanessa had been charming at first, polite, friendly, interested in the farm, or at least pretending to be. Over time, little comments started appearing, nothing openly cruel, just small cuts. Comments about Diane's clothes, comments about farm life, comments about how different things would be if the property were managed more professionally. Ryan usually laughed them off. Sometimes he changed the subject. Almost never did he defend his mother. Then came the engagement. Everything accelerated after that. Vanessa suddenly became obsessed with appearances, social media posts, networking events, country club dinners, private investor gatherings. People Diane had never met began appearing in photos alongside Ryan. People who spoke about opportunities and development. people who looked at land and saw numbers instead of history. One afternoon several months earlier, Vanessa had casually asked a question. What are Ryan's long-term plans for the farm? Diane remembered the strange look on her face, not curiosity. Calculation. At the time, Diane simply answered the truth. The farm belongs to me. Vanessa had smiled, but the smile hadn't reached her eyes. Now, standing beside the fence, Diane wondered why that conversation suddenly felt important. By late morning, she returned to the house. The wedding was scheduled for the next day. Technically, she could still drive there. Nobody could physically stop her. But showing up uninvited would only create the scene Vanessa wanted, a confused old woman begging for acceptance. Diane refused to become that story. She poured herself coffee and sat down with her laptop. Something compelled her to search through social media. She rarely used those platforms. But Ryan and Vanessa practically lived on them. A few minutes later, she found Vanessa's profile. Most posts showed wedding preparations. Flowers, venues, travel arrangements, expensive dinners. Then Diane noticed something else. Pictures of Whitmore Ridge Farm, her farm. Several photographs had been professionally edited. The barns looked larger. The fields appeared more luxurious. Even the stables had been altered to look like part of an upscale equestrian resort. Diane frowned. She clicked one image. The caption read, "Excited for the future of Whitmore Ridge." Big things ahead, hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, several people asking questions about upcoming plans. Diane's stomach tightened. What future? What plans? She continued scrolling. Most posts were harmless. Until she found one from 6 weeks earlier, a photograph of Ryan standing beside one of the paddocks. He wore a tailored jacket and expensive watch. The caption was short, "Proud to continue building the Whitmore family legacy." At first glance, it sounded innocent, but the comments underneath told a different story. "Congratulations on the property. Can't wait to see the redevelopment. Amazing investment opportunity. Looking forward to hearing more after the wedding." Diane reread the comments twice. No corrections, no clarifications, nothing from Ryan explaining that he didn't own the property. Nothing from Vanessa correcting assumptions. The lie had simply been allowed to grow, maybe encouraged. A sharp knock at the front door interrupted her thoughts. It was Emily Grayson, a neighboring farm owner and one of Diane's oldest friends. Both women were in their late 60s. Emily carried a covered casserole dish. She stopped smiling the moment she saw Diane's expression. What happened? Diane handed over her phone. Emily read Ryan's text. Her face hardened immediately. He actually sent this. Diane nodded. Emily sat down across from her. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Finally, Emily sighed. "I'm sorry." Diane managed a small smile. "So am I." Emily hesitated. Then she said something unexpected. "I almost didn't mention this." Diane looked up. "Mention what?" Emily reached into her purse. "I attended a charity dinner last month. Some people from Lexington were there." She pulled out a folded brochure. "I recognized your farm in one of the pictures." Diane felt a sudden chill. Emily slid the brochure across the table. The cover showed an aerial photograph of Whitmore Ridge Farm. Not similar land, not another property. Her property. Across the bottom appeared a polished company logo, Whitmore Ridge Development. Diane's pulse quickened. Slowly she opened the brochure. Inside were artist renderings of luxury guest lodges, private riding facilities, and event spaces. Pages filled with investment language, projected revenue, future expansion, development phases. And then she saw it, a photograph of Ryan. Beneath it was a title, Future Owner, Whitmore Ridge Farm. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Diane looked up at Emily. Neither woman said a word, because both of them understood the same terrifying thing. Someone had been planning something involving Diane's farm. And apparently that plan had started long before Ryan sent the text telling his mother not to come to his wedding. Diane kept her hand on the brochure as if it might disappear if she let go. The paper was thick, glossy, expensive. Someone had paid good money to make Whitmore Ridge Farm look like something it had never claimed to be. The cover showed her east pasture from above, but the colors had been sharpened until the grass looked like velvet. The old training ring had been edited clean. The gravel drive softened into something that looked almost like a resort entrance. Even the weathered barn Harold had built with his own hands looked polished and grand. Emily sat across from her, watching quietly. "I didn't know if I should bring it," Emily said. "I thought maybe Ryan had talked to you." Diane looked down at the words again. Future owner, Whitmore Ridge Farm. Not son of the owner, not family representative, future owner. Her throat tightened, but her face stayed still. That was something farm life had taught her. Animals could feel panic before people admitted it. So could liars. "Where did you get this?" Diane asked. "At the Lexington charity dinner," Emily said. There was a small table near the entrance. Real estate people, development people, they were passing these around like it was already settled. Who was there? Emily hesitated. Vanessa, Ryan, Vanessa's father, a few men in suits I didn't recognize. They were talking about equestrian tourism and private retreats. I didn't hear everything. Diane's fingers pressed into the edge of the brochure. Ryan had stood in front of strangers and allowed them to believe the farm was his. Maybe he had even encouraged it. The thought hurt in a different place than the wedding text. The text had humiliated her. This felt like trespassing, not on the land, on Harold's life. She opened the brochure again and forced herself to read slowly. There were phrases about legacy development, premium guest lodging, curated riding experiences, and private event opportunities. It sounded smooth enough to impress people who had never mucked a stall or waded up through a storm with a sick horse. Then she saw a line near the bottom of the second page. Phase 1 pending family transfer approval. Diane read it twice. Emily leaned forward. Diane? Family transfer, Diane said softly. Emily's face changed. You didn't sign anything? No, did Ryan ever ask you to? Diane thought back. There had been papers now that she forced herself to remember. Not transfer papers. Not exactly, at least not presented that way. 3 months earlier, Ryan had brought a folder to the farm office after Sunday lunch. He had said Vanessa wanted to help organize future planning, since Diane was getting older and shouldn't have to handle everything alone. He had smiled when he said it. Gentle, tired, familiar. Diane had not signed. She had told him she would read everything later. Ryan had looked disappointed. Vanessa had gone quiet for the rest of the afternoon. At the time, Diane thought she had offended them. Now she wondered if refusing had saved her. I need to look at something, Diane said. She stood and walked toward the small office off the back hallway. Emily followed but stopped at the doorway, careful not to intrude. Diane unlocked the filing cabinet beneath Harold's old desk. The drawer stuck halfway, like always. Harold used to tug it once with the heel of his hand and mutter at it like it was a stubborn mule. Diane did the same thing now, and the drawer slid open. The folder was still there. Ryan's folder. A plain blue one with a printed label that said family planning. Diane laid it on the desk and opened it. Inside were several documents she had skimmed but never trusted enough to sign. A proposed management authorization, a farm modernization overview, a letter about estate efficiency. Nothing looked illegal at first glance. That was what made it dangerous. The language was soft, helpful, respectful. It talked about reducing Diane's workload and preparing for eventual transition. But one page caught her eye now, authorization to discuss property valuation with prospective planning partners. Her name was printed at the top. The signature line was blank, blank. Diane released a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Emily stepped closer. Thank God. Diane did not answer. She pulled out her phone and took pictures of every page. Then she photographed the brochure, front, back, inside pages, Ryan's title, the transfer line. She emailed the images to herself, then saved them into a folder labeled Whitmore Records. It was a small act, but it steadied her. She was no longer just a hurt mother sitting in a kitchen. She was the owner of a property someone else was trying to dress up and sell with words. Emily watched her. What are you going to do? Diane looked at the wedding invitation still sitting on the corner of the desk. Thick cream paper, gold letters. Her name had once been written carefully on the guest list, mother of the groom. Now she was not welcome. I'm not calling Ryan, Diane said. Emily nodded slowly. That might be wise. I'm not calling Vanessa either, even wiser. Diane almost smiled, but it faded quickly. If I call now, they'll deny everything. They'll say I misunderstood. They'll say I'm emotional because of the wedding. Emily's mouth tightened. That sounds like Vanessa. Diane closed the blue folder and placed it beside the brochure. I need facts first. She reached for the old address book Harold had kept in the top drawer. Most people stored numbers in phones now, but Diane still trusted paper. She found Grace Lowell's name near the back. Grace had handled the farm's books for nearly 15 years before retiring to part-time consulting. Sharp woman, careful woman, not easily impressed. Diane dialed. Grace answered on the fourth ring, her voice rough with sleep. Diane, I'm sorry to bother you this early. You don't sound like this is about hay invoices. It isn't. The line went quiet. Diane told her only what mattered. The wedding text, the brochure, Ryan listed as future owner, the phrase family transfer approval, the unsigned papers. She did not cry. She did not call anyone names. She spoke like a woman reporting a fence down before the horses got loose. Grace listened without interrupting. When Diane finished, Grace asked, Do you still have the original deed? Yes. Tax records? Yes. Any trust documents from Harold? In the locked drawer. Good. Don't take those anywhere yet. Don't sign anything. Don't reply to Ryan in writing except to say you received his message. Nothing emotional, nothing they can twist. Diane glanced at the phone on the desk. You think they would? I think people do strange things when land is involved. That sentence settled heavily in the room. Grace continued, send me pictures of the brochure and whatever Ryan brought you. I'll search Kentucky business filings and see if anyone registered an entity using the Whitmore name. Diane looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, the barn stood quiet in the morning light. It looked exactly as it had yesterday, but everything felt different now. The land had not moved. The fences had not changed. Yet somehow strangers were already discussing its future without the woman who owned it. I'll send them now, Diane said. And Diane? Yes? Put the deed somewhere safe today. Diane looked at Harold's desk. I will. After the call ended, Emily helped her scan the documents using the old printer in the office. It groaned and clicked like it resented being useful, but it worked. Page by page, Diane copied the folder Ryan had left behind. She copied the brochure, she copied the deed. She placed the originals back into the locked drawer, then paused. No, not there, not anymore. She took the deed and Harold's trust folder upstairs to her bedroom. In the back of the closet sat a small fireproof safe. Harold had bought it years earlier after a neighboring farm lost records in a lightning fire. Diane entered the code with stiff fingers and placed the documents inside. Then she changed the code. It took 2 tries. Her hands were not shaking from fear anymore. They were shaking from the effort of refusing to break. When she returned downstairs, Emily was standing by the kitchen table, staring at Diane's phone. It's Ryan, Emily said. The phone buzzed again. Diane picked it up. Ryan had sent another message. Mom, please don't make this awkward. Vanessa is under a lot of pressure. We'll talk after the honeymoon. Diane read it once, then a second message arrived. And please don't bring up the farm to anyone this weekend. Some business people may be there and I don't want confusion. There it was. Not grief, not concern, not shame. Control. Diane felt something harden inside her. The message was not proof of everything, but it proved enough. Ryan knew there was something to hide. She typed slowly. I received your message. I will not attend the ceremony. She stopped there. No anger, no explanation, no promise. She took a screenshot before sending it. Emily touched her shoulder. Are you sure? Diane pressed send. Yes, she said, but I'm not disappearing. The reply from Ryan came less than a minute later. Thank you. This is better for everyone. Diane stared at those words until they stopped hurting and started teaching her. Better for everyone. She wondered if Ryan included her in that word anymore. Before she could set the phone down, a new email appeared from Grace. The subject line made Diane's stomach drop. Whitmore Ridge Development, LLC. Diane opened it. Grace had written only one sentence. Diane, someone filed this company name 6 weeks ago, and Ryan is listed as managing member. Diane stared at Grace's email until the words seemed to press themselves into the kitchen air. Whitmore Ridge Development, LLC. Ryan is listed as managing member. Emily read over her shoulder and let out a slow breath. Diane, I see it, Diane said. Her voice sounded calm, but inside, something had shifted. Until that moment, part of her had still wanted to believe there was a softer explanation. Maybe Ryan had exaggerated. Maybe Vanessa had gotten carried away. Maybe the brochure had been a foolish marketing idea nobody meant to take seriously. But an LLC was not a joke. Someone had filled out paperwork. Someone had chosen that name. Someone had attached her farm to a company without asking the woman who owned it. Diane clicked the attachment Grace had sent. The state filing appeared on the screen. It was basic, not dramatic. Company name, filing date, registered office, managing member Ryan Whitmore. Her son's name sat there in plain black letters, neat and official. That hurt more than if he had shouted at her. Official records had a coldness to them. They did not care about memories, excuses, or family. They simply showed what had been done. Emily pulled out a chair and sat down beside her. Did he ever mention this? No, not once. Diane shook her head. He mentioned planning. He mentioned taxes. He said Vanessa thought I needed help thinking ahead. Emily's face tightened. Help. That word sat between them. Diane opened the next attachment. It was a screenshot Grace had taken from the Kentucky Secretary of State website. The company had been filed 6 weeks earlier. 6 weeks. That meant Ryan had formed it before the rehearsal dinner, before the wedding text, before the glossy brochure landed in Diane's kitchen. She thought back to those weeks. Ryan had visited twice. Vanessa had come once, wearing white jeans and shoes too clean for a barn. They had walked the property together after lunch. Vanessa had taken pictures near the front gate, the stone wall, the riding ring, the old tobacco barn Harold had converted into storage. Diane remembered standing in the kitchen window, watching them. At the time, she had thought Vanessa was finally showing interest in the farm. Now she understood Vanessa had been collecting scenery. Diane opened Vanessa's social media page again. This time, she did not scroll like a mother looking at wedding pictures. She looked like an owner inspecting trespass. There were more photos than she had noticed before. One showed the long gravel drive at sunset. The caption read, "Some places are born for transformation." Another showed the front pasture with 2 grazing horses edited into a soft golden haze. Legacy land. Future vision. A third showed Ryan standing beside the gate, one hand resting on the post where Harold had carved the farm's name decades ago. The caption said, "Proud of what we're building." Diane's jaw tightened. What we're building? They had not built that gate. They had not replaced the rails after the ice storm 3 winters ago. They had not stood ankle-deep in mud to keep the horses calm during thunder. They had not sat at the kitchen table at midnight deciding which bill could wait and which one could not. They had taken pictures, then they had called it vision. Diane took screenshots of every post. She captured the captions, the dates, the comments, and every tag. Several names repeated beneath the posts. Caldwell Capital, Mercer Equine Holdings, Bluegrass Hospitality Group, men and women with titles in real estate, investment, and private tourism. She did not know all of them. But she knew enough to understand this was not only about a wedding. Emily leaned closer. "Look at that comment." Diane froze on a post from 3 weeks earlier. A man named Grant Mercer had written, "Looking forward to hearing more at the reception. This property has serious potential." Vanessa had replied with a champagne glass emoji and the words, "Big announcement coming." Diane felt the blood drain from her face. At the reception, Emily whispered. The room suddenly felt too small. Tomorrow's wedding was no longer just a wedding Diane had been asked not to attend. It was a stage, a room full of people who had been invited to watch Ryan and Vanessa step into a life built partly on a lie. Diane saved the screenshot. Then she kept going. Under another photo, a woman had commented, "Can't wait to see what you and Ryan do once the transfer is complete." Vanessa had liked the comment. No correction, no hesitation, just a tiny heart beneath a false assumption. Diane stood so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. The sound startled both women. She walked to the sink and gripped the counter, looking out across the yard toward the barns. For a moment, the hurt rose so fast she could barely breathe. She had expected shame from Vanessa. She had even expected weakness from Ryan. But this was more than shame, this was use. They had used her farm, her name, her silence, and her expected love. They had counted on her not making a scene because mothers were supposed to endure. They had counted on her caring more about Ryan's happiness than her own dignity. Diane straightened. That was their first mistake. Her phone rang. Ryan. Emily's eyes widened. "Are you going to answer?" Diane looked at the screen. Ryan's name flashed again and again. For years, that name had pulled her heart before her judgment. If he called, she answered. If he needed help, she came. If he sounded tired, she softened. Not this time. She let it ring. When the call ended, a voicemail appeared. Diane did not play it immediately. She opened her recording folder and saved the missed call log with a screenshot. Then she played the voicemail on speaker. Ryan's voice filled the kitchen, low and controlled. "Mom, I know this morning was emotional. I need you to promise me you won't talk to anyone from Vanessa's family about the farm. They don't understand how we do things, and I don't need mixed messages right before the wedding. Just let me handle it. Please. You've always trusted me before." Diane listened without moving. Then came a pause. His voice changed slightly. "And don't call Grace or Martin about this. Vanessa said people are already confused enough." The voicemail ended. Emily stared at the phone. "He knows exactly who you might call." "Yes," Diane said. That was the part that chilled her most. Ryan was not only asking her to stay quiet. He was trying to block her from the 2 people most likely to protect her, Grace and Martin. Her accountant and Harold's old attorney. Diane saved the voicemail once to her phone, once to her email. Then she forwarded it to Grace with a short message. "Please preserve this with the other materials." Within 3 minutes, Grace replied. "Already saved. Do not respond to him further. I am checking for related filings." Diane read the message aloud. Emily stood. "You need Martin, I know. Today." Diane looked at the clock. It was just after noon. The wedding was tomorrow. There was not much time, but there was time enough to stop being careless. She found Martin Hales's number in Harold's address book. Martin had handled the estate after Harold died. He was semi-retired now, but he still answered his own phone. "Martin Hales." "Martin, it's Diane Whitmore." His tone softened. "Diane, it's been a while. I need help." He did not ask whether it could wait. That was why Harold had trusted him. "What happened?" Diane gave him the short version. The wedding band, the brochure, the LLC. The posts, the voicemail. She did not tell it like gossip. She told it like a weather report before a storm. Martin listened. When she finished, he was quiet for several seconds. Then he said, "Do you have the deed?" "Yes." "Original?" "My safe, good." "Trust documents?" "Same place. Do not bring originals unless I ask." "Scan everything. Send copies to my secure email." "I want the LLC filing, the brochure, Ryan's voicemail, and every post that suggests ownership or transfer." Diane closed her eyes briefly. The steadiness in his voice helped. "Martin," she said, "can they do anything without my signature? Not legally transfer the farm?" "No. But they can create confusion. They can make promises. They can take deposits. They can damage your name. And if someone believes Ryan has authority, you may have to spend time and money proving he doesn't." Diane looked toward the brochure. "So the lie itself can still hurt me." "Yes," Martin said, "especially if people have already relied on it." Diane felt Emily's hand touch her shoulder. Martin continued, "There's something else." When Harold updated his estate plan, he included language about conservation and family protection. "I need to review it before I say more, but it may matter now." Diane's heart tightened at Harold's name. He expected something like this? He worried land could bring pressure, Martin said carefully. He was practical. That sounded like Harold. Loving but practical. Gentle but not foolish. "I'll send everything," Diane said. "And Diane?" "Yes? Do not sign anything. Do not discuss transfer, inheritance, future ownership, valuation, or development with Ryan, Vanessa, or anyone connected to the wedding. If they contact you, preserve it." "I understand." After she hung up, Diane and Emily spent nearly an hour scanning and sending documents. Diane created folders by date. She labeled screenshots. She saved the voicemail file. She printed the LLC filing. The work gave her hands something to do while her heart tried to catch up. Late in the afternoon, Emily left reluctantly, making Diane promise to call if Ryan showed up. Diane locked the door behind her. The house grew quiet again. She made tea but did not drink it. She sat at Harold's desk, staring at the old scratches in the wood. Some were from years of farm work. Some were from Harold's habit of pressing too hard when he wrote checks. One small mark near the corner came from Diane's own wedding ring years ago, back when she and Harold had sat side by side planning feed budgets and repairs. This desk had held honest problems, bills, weather, a sick horse, a broken tractor. Now it held betrayal wrapped in beautiful paper. Her laptop chimed, another email from Grace. Diane opened it quickly. "I found something else." Vanessa posted a private event page connected to the reception. It describes Whitmore Ridge as a family-owned estate entering its next ownership chapter. Screenshots attached. Diane opened the attachment. The page showed the wedding reception schedule, cocktails, dinner, toasts, and then one line that made her hand go cold, 8:15 p.m. Whitmore Ridge Future Vision Presentation, hosted by Ryan Whitmore and Vanessa Caldwell. Diane did not move for a long moment after reading the schedule. 8:15 p.m. Whitmore Ridge Future Vision Presentation, hosted by Ryan Whitmore and Vanessa Caldwell. The words looked polished and harmless on the screen, but Diane felt the threat inside them. A presentation was not a casual conversation. It meant slides, guests, investors, a room prepared to hear a story Diane had never approved. Tomorrow night, while she was supposed to sit quietly at home pretending not to be hurt, Ryan and Vanessa planned to stand in front of strangers and speak about the future of her land. She printed the page immediately. The old printer complained as it pulled the paper through, but Diane stood over it until the document came out warm in her hand. She wrote the date and time in the corner with a blue pen. Then she placed it in the growing folder on Harold's desk. Brochure, LLC filing, screenshots, Ryan's voicemail. Wedding schedule. The pile was no longer small. That frightened her. It also steadied her. She forwarded the event page to Martin and Grace, then typed a short message. "This appears to be scheduled during the reception. I did not authorize any presentation involving the farm." She read it twice before sending it. No anger, no accusation, just facts. 5 minutes later, Martin called. "You need to come to my office," he said. Diane glanced toward the window. The sun was low now, turning the fields gold. "Tonight?" "If you can drive safely, yes. If not, first thing in the morning. But I would rather not wait." His tone told her enough. "I'll come tonight. Bring copies only." "Leave the originals in your safe. I already locked them up." "Good." Diane ended the call and sat still for another breath. The house felt different now, not unsafe exactly, but exposed. As if the walls had been listening to too many lies for too long. She went upstairs and changed out of her farm shirt into a clean blouse and dark jacket. She did not dress for Vanessa's world. She dressed for herself, practical, neat, steady. Before leaving, she checked the safe again, even though she knew it was locked. Then she changed the password on her email, her online tax account, and the farm bookkeeping portal Grace still helped her manage. It was not dramatic, no one saw it. But it mattered. For years, Ryan had known too much about her habits, the names of her horses, the drawer where she kept invoices, the password she once used for nearly everything, because remembering new ones annoyed her. She had trusted him with the ordinary details of her life, never imagining those details could someday make her vulnerable. Now she was done being careless. She drove to Martin's office in town with the folder resting on the passenger seat. The road curved past rolling fields and old stone fences. She passed farms that had already changed hands. Some had become subdivisions. Some had become event venues with pretty signs and no animals. She had nothing against change when people chose it freely. What she hated was being pushed toward it by people who smiled while taking measurements. Martin's office sat above a small insurance agency on Main Street. The building smelled faintly of paper, dust, and coffee. He met her at the top of the stairs before she even knocked. He was in his early 70s, tall and slightly bent at the shoulders, with silver hair and reading glasses hanging from his collar. He had been Harold's lawyer, but more than that, he had been Harold's friend. Seeing him made Diane feel both safer and sadder. "I wish this were a social visit," he said. "So do I." They sat across from each other in his conference room. Diane opened the folder and slid the documents toward him. Martin did not react quickly. He never had. He read with a pen in his hand, marking dates, circling names, writing small notes in the margins of copies. When he reached the brochure, his expression hardened. "When did you first see this?" "Today. Emily brought it." "Who is Emily?" "Emily Grayson, neighbor. She got it at a charity dinner in Lexington." "Good. We may need her to confirm where it came from." Diane nodded. He moved to the LLC filing. "This company was formed without you," he said. "I know. It does not own your farm. It does not control your farm. But the name creates an impression that Ryan has authority." "Yes." Martin opened the event schedule next. His jaw tightened when he saw the 8:15 presentation. "Diane, this is more serious than the family exaggeration." She felt her hands fold tighter in her lap. "What does that mean?" "It means they may be using your property as the foundation for a business pitch. Maybe only informally. Maybe not. But if investors are being told Ryan has future control, that creates risk. For me? For you, for them, for anyone who relies on the statement." Diane looked down at the folder. "Can they sell anything without me?" "No, not the land itself. But they can create enough confusion to cause damage. They can collect interest. They can promise access. They can make your refusal look like interference instead of ownership." That last word landed hard. Ownership. Diane had never thought of the farm as power. She thought of it as responsibility. Feed bills, repairs, taxes, storms, fences, aging equipment. But now other people were treating it as a prize, and prizes attracted hands. Martin leaned back and removed another file from a cabinet beside him. This one was older, thick and tied with a worn red band. "Harold's estate planning documents," he said. Diane felt her chest tighten. "You kept copies?" "Of course." He opened the file carefully, as if the papers deserved respect. Diane recognized Harold's signature on the first page, strong, slanted, familiar. She touched the edge of the document but did not pull it closer. Martin turned several pages. "Harold insisted on this section," he said. "At the time I thought he was being overly cautious." "What section?" "The Family Land Protection Clause." Diane looked up. Martin read silently for a few seconds, then explained in plain words. "The farm is yours outright. That has not changed. But Harold gave you a conservation option tied to the estate plan. If a future heir or family member attempted to pressure you into selling, misrepresented ownership, or used the land to secure unauthorized business interests, you retained the right to move the property into a protected family land trust." Diane absorbed the words slowly. "So Ryan couldn't force a sale." "Correct. Couldn't borrow against it. Not without your legal consent. Couldn't promise it to investors." "He could promise anything with his mouth," Martin said. "But he could not make it true." For the first time that day, Diane felt the ground beneath her feet again. Not joy. Not victory. Ground. Martin studied her carefully. Activating something like this is not small. It may affect Ryan's expectations permanently. It may also escalate conflict before it resolves anything. "He already escalated it," Diane said quietly. Martin did not argue. A knock sounded at the conference room door. His assistant stepped in, holding a printed email. She looked uncomfortable. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "This just came through from Grace Lowell." She marked it urgent. Martin took the page and read it. Then his eyes moved to Diane. "What is it?" Diane asked. He handed her the printout. Grace had found a promotional PDF attached to Whitmore Ridge Development's private investor packet. Near the bottom of the final page, under projected milestones, was a line Diane had not seen before. Owner transition document expected to be executed prior to public announcement. Diane read it once. Then again. Her mouth went dry. Martin's voice was quiet. Diane, have you received any new documents from Ryan or Vanessa recently? She thought of the blue folder labeled family planning. The unsigned authorization. Vanessa's cool silence after Diane refused to sign. Yes, Diane said. Martin leaned forward. Then they may still be expecting your signature before tomorrow night. Diane stared at the sentence until the words began to blur. Owner transition documents expected to be executed prior to public announcement. She lowered the page slowly and looked at Martin. They were counting on me signing something. Martin nodded once. That is what it looks like. But I never agreed to anything. You know that. I know that. The question is whether they expected you to realize what you were signing before it was too late. The room fell silent. Diane thought about the blue folder Vanessa had left on her kitchen table 3 weeks earlier. She remembered the casual smile, the way Vanessa had called the papers routine family planning documents. She remembered Ryan standing beside her, barely paying attention, acting as though it was all administrative nonsense. At the time, Diane had only skimmed the first page before putting the folder aside. Now she wished she had read every line. Can we find out exactly what was in those documents? She asked. If you still have them. I do. Good. Martin stood and walked toward a copy machine in the corner. He made copies of Grace's email and added them to a growing legal file. Bring those documents here tomorrow morning, he said. Before the wedding. I will. No exceptions. Diane nodded. For the first time, she understood something painful. Ryan and Vanessa had not suddenly decided to exclude her from the wedding. The exclusion was only the latest move. The planning had started long before the text message. The drive home felt longer than usual. Darkness had settled over the Kentucky countryside. The headlights illuminated fence posts and stretches of pasture, one narrow section at a time. Diane gripped the steering wheel and replayed the past few months in her mind. There had been small things. Too many small things. Vanessa asking unusual questions about farm taxes. Ryan wanting copies of insurance paperwork, requests for old surveys, questions about boundary lines. At the time they had seemed harmless. Together they formed a different picture. By the time Diane pulled into her driveway, it was nearly 10 o'clock. The farmhouse sat quietly beneath the stars. Normally the sight calmed her. Tonight it felt like evidence. She locked the front door behind her and walked directly to the kitchen cabinet where she had stored Vanessa's blue folder. For one terrible second it wasn't there. Her pulse jumped. She searched the shelf again, then another. Nothing. Diane froze. The folder had been there 3 days ago. She remembered seeing it. Slowly, she began checking other cabinets and drawers. The folder was gone. She stood motionless in the center of the kitchen. Someone had taken it. The realization felt cold. Not stolen by a stranger. Taken by someone who knew exactly where to look. Diane forced herself to breathe. Panic would not help. She moved carefully through the house. Living room, desk, bedroom, storage closet. Nothing. Then she stopped. Ryan had visited the farm 4 days earlier. He had arrived unexpectedly while she was feeding horses. He had been alone. At the time, she had thought nothing of it. Now she remembered something else. He had gone inside the house to use the bathroom for nearly 20 minutes, far longer than necessary. Diane sat down heavily at the kitchen table. The missing folder might mean nothing, or it might mean everything. She opened her laptop. Instead of guessing, she began searching emails, texts, photos, anything. An hour later, she found what she needed. A photograph, not of the documents themselves, of the folder. Months earlier, she had taken a picture of the kitchen table for a farm insurance inventory update. The blue folder happened to be visible in the corner of the frame. The image included a handwritten label, Family Transfer Review. Diane immediately copied the photograph into a new folder and uploaded it to cloud storage. Evidence. Not enough evidence, but something. Her phone vibrated. Ryan. For a moment, she considered ignoring the call. Then she answered. Hello, Mom. His voice sounded strained. Where are you? He asked. At home. You didn't answer my messages. I was busy. A pause followed. Vanessa is upset. Diane almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the statement felt absurd. She had been banned from her son's wedding, yet somehow Vanessa's feelings remained the emergency. What does Vanessa need? Diane asked. Ryan hesitated. Nothing. That isn't true. Another silence. Finally, he sighed. She thinks you've been talking to people. I have. Mom, you sent me away from your wedding, Ryan. Did you expect me to sit quietly and smile? His voice hardened. You don't understand everything that's happening. Then explain it. He didn't. Instead, he changed direction. Look, Vanessa just wants things to go smoothly tomorrow. Smoothly for whom? Everyone. Diane leaned back in her chair. Ryan, did you take a folder from my house? The silence was immediate. Too immediate. Then came a laugh, a forced one. What? A blue folder? No, you're sure? Yes. The answer arrived quickly, too quickly. Diane closed her eyes. She knew her son. When he told the truth, he became irritated. When he lied, he became efficient. Why would I take your paperwork? He asked. You tell me. Mom, this is exactly the kind of thing Vanessa is worried about. What thing? You assuming people are against you. Diane felt something inside her shift. Not break. Shift. Ryan was doing what Vanessa always did. Deny, redirect, blame. He was no longer even trying to understand her perspective. He was managing her. The realization hurt more than the wedding text. Good night, Ryan, she said. Mom, good night. She ended the call. A message arrived less than 2 minutes later. Not from Ryan, from Vanessa. Diane stared at the screen. The message was polite. Very polite. That made it worse. I hope tomorrow doesn't become more difficult than it needs to be. Family disagreements should stay private. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of the wedding. Just a warning disguised as courtesy. Diane saved a screenshot, then another. Then she forwarded the message to Martin. At midnight, she finally went upstairs. Sleep did not come easily. When it did, it lasted less than 4 hours. The next morning, she woke before sunrise. The wedding day had arrived. Diane dressed quietly and gathered every document she still possessed. Trust papers, tax records, property deeds, insurance documents, old surveys, everything. She placed copies into 2 separate folders, one for Martin, one for herself. At 7:30, her phone rang. Grace Lowell. The accountant sounded unusually tense. Diane, I found something. Diane immediately sat down. What is it? I was checking business registration updates linked to Whitmore Ridge Development. And? There was a filing amendment submitted 3 weeks ago. Diane's stomach tightened. What kind of amendment? A management authorization attachment. Meaning? Grace paused. When the amendment was submitted, supporting documentation was referenced. Diane felt the room grow still around her. What documentation? I haven't seen the attachment itself. Then how do you know? Because the filing description lists it. Diane gripped the phone harder. Grace, the accountant exhaled slowly. The attachment was described as a signed preliminary family consent acknowledgement. Diane went cold. A sign did what? That is exactly how it appears in the filing notes. Diane's eyes drifted toward the empty space in the cabinet where the blue folder had once been, a missing folder, a company filing, an expected ownership transition, and now a reference to a signed family consent document she had never signed. Grace's voice softened. Diane, if someone submitted paperwork implying your consent, we need to know exactly what was attached. Diane looked out the kitchen window toward the pastures Harold had spent his life protecting. Then she spoke quietly. I think someone already knew I wasn't coming to the wedding. What do you mean? Diane stared at the sunrise spreading across Whitmore Ridge. Because they thought they already had my signature. Diane ended the call with Grace and remained seated at the kitchen table for several minutes. The sunrise stretched across the fields beyond her window, painting the fences and barns gold. On any other morning, it would have felt peaceful. Today, it felt like a countdown. Someone had referenced a signed consent document in a business filing. Someone had removed the blue folder from her home. And someone had built an entire redevelopment plan around the assumption that she would never object. She gathered the folders she had prepared and drove straight to Martin Hales's office. The attorney was already waiting. When Diane explained what Grace had discovered, Martin's expression darkened immediately. Did Grace send you the filing reference number? Yes. Diane handed him a printed copy. Martin read it twice before reaching for his phone. He called a legal records contact and spent nearly 15 minutes verifying details. Diane sat quietly across from him, her stomach tightening with every passing minute. Finally, he hung up. They definitely referenced supporting documentation. Can we get it? Not immediately. Diane felt frustration rise. Why not? Because the attachment itself wasn't publicly filed. Only the filing description appears in the database. So we're supposed to wait? For now. Martin leaned forward. But the description helps us. How? If someone submitted paperwork they weren't authorized to use, the filing itself becomes part of the evidence trail. Diane nodded slowly. That wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was something. Martin opened a legal pad. I need to ask you a difficult question. What? Has Ryan ever had access to your signature? Diane stared at him. The question felt like a punch. Of course he has. Documents, farm paperwork, insurance forms, tax records over the years. Martin's jaw tightened. Then we can't ignore the possibility that someone copied it. The room fell silent. Diane suddenly remembered an afternoon nearly a year earlier. Ryan had helped organize old files in the farmhouse office. Several folders containing decades of records had been spread across the desk. At the time, she had been grateful for the help. Now she wasn't sure what to think. Martin noticed the shift in her expression. "You remembered something?" "Maybe. Tell me." She did. He listened carefully. When she finished, he made several notes. Then he looked directly at her. "Until we know more, assume every document matters." Diane nodded. "I already do." A few hours later, she left Martin's office carrying copies of everything. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for early afternoon. The investor gathering would happen later during the reception. She had several hours before then. Instead of returning home, Diane drove to the local bank. The safe deposit box sat inside a secure room she had used for years. She opened it and carefully reviewed every original document stored there. The farm deed, Harold's estate papers, trust documents, tax records. Nothing appeared missing. Nothing appeared altered. That should have reassured her. Instead, it created a new question. If the originals remained untouched, where had the supposed consent paperwork come from? As she locked the box again, her phone vibrated. "Ryan." For a moment, she considered ignoring him. Instead, she answered. His voice sounded tense. "Mom, where are you? Out. Can we talk? We are talking." He exhaled sharply. "Vanessa's family is asking questions." "About what?" "The farm." Diane almost smiled. Not from satisfaction, from certainty. The pressure was beginning. "What kind of questions?" Ryan hesitated. "The future. The future of land you don't own." Silence, then irritation. "Mom, why are you doing this?" Diane closed her eyes. There it was again, not concern, not accountability, only frustration that she had stopped cooperating. "I'm doing what?" "Making everything harder." The words hurt more than she expected. Her exclusion from the wedding was apparently not the problem. The problem was her refusal to stay quiet. "You banned me from your wedding, Ryan." "That wasn't. It was exactly what happened." Another silence followed. Then he lowered his voice. "Look, after the ceremony, maybe we can sit down together." "Together with who? You?" "Me. Vanessa." Diane laughed softly. It surprised even her. The sound held no humor, only disappointment. "I offered conversations months ago. Mom, you wanted signatures. That's not fair." "No," Diane said. "What's not fair is finding out through strangers what my own son is doing with my property." He immediately became defensive. "We haven't done anything." The statement came too fast, too rehearsed. Diane had spent enough years around horse traders to recognize panics disguised as confidence. She ended the call a minute later. Nothing useful remained to be said. By noon, she was back at the farm. She fed the horses and completed the usual chores. The routine helped settle her mind. No matter how complicated people became, the animals remained honest. Then a pickup truck appeared near the entrance gate. Diane recognized the driver immediately. Tom Mercer, a neighboring landowner. Tom climbed out and approached slowly. His expression looked uncomfortable. "Diane." "Tom," he removed his hat. "I wasn't sure whether to stop. What's wrong?" Tom hesitated, then he handed her an envelope. "I think you need to see this." Diane opened it. Inside was a glossy brochure, the same investor material she had already seen, but this version contained several additional pages. One page displayed an artist's rendering of a luxury resort. Another showed projected revenue figures. Then Diane reached the final section. Her stomach tightened. A quote appeared beneath Ryan's photograph. "Whitmore Ridge Farm will enter its next chapter under our family's unified leadership." Diane read it twice, then a third time. Tom shifted uneasily. "I got invited to an investor preview meeting last month." She looked up. "What? I didn't attend." "Why not?" "Because something felt off." He pointed toward the brochure. "Ryan told people you were ready to retire and transfer operational control." Diane felt a cold wave move through her chest. Not because Ryan had lied, because he had been telling the lie for months, maybe longer. When did he say that? Tom thought carefully. "About 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks. Long before the wedding invitation drama, long before the text message, long before Vanessa supposedly became worried about appearances. The timeline suddenly shifted. This wasn't a wedding problem that had evolved into a property problem. The property scheme had existed first. The wedding was simply another tool. Tom studied her face. "You didn't know?" It wasn't a question. Diane folded the brochure carefully. "No," she said quietly. "I didn't." After Tom left, Diane carried the brochure inside and scanned every page. Then she uploaded digital copies to cloud storage and emailed them to Martin and Grace. More evidence, more lies, more proof that someone had been building a future based on promises they had no authority to make. The afternoon passed quickly. At 4:30, Martin called. His voice sounded unusually serious. "Diane, I need you to listen carefully." She immediately sat down. "What happened?" I spoke with a contact who attended a planning meeting 2 months ago. Diane felt her pulse quicken. And? The meeting included Vanessa, Ryan, and several potential investors. What did they discuss? Martin paused. When he spoke again, each word landed heavily. They showed a presentation containing projected ownership transition dates. Diane gripped the edge of the table. Ownership transition? Yes. Martin's voice lowered. And according to the presentation, your transfer of authority was supposed to have already happened. Diane stared across the empty kitchen. A transfer that never happened. A consent document she never signed. A missing folder, months of false promises. The pieces were finally beginning to align, but before she could respond, Martin spoke again. There is something else. What? Another pause. Then the sentence that made her blood run cold. One attendee remembers seeing a document displayed on screen. Diane barely breathed. What kind of document? A signed authorization page. The room seemed to tilt around her. Martin's next words arrived slowly, and the signature shown on that page was yours. Diane did not speak for several seconds. The phone rested against her ear, but Martin's last words seemed to come from somewhere far away. The signature shown on that page was yours. She looked down at her own hand on the kitchen table. The fingers were slightly bent from years of work. The skin was thin now, marked by sun and age and old scratches that never fully faded. That hand had signed feed checks, tax forms, boarding agreements, insurance renewals, and condolence cards. That hand had signed Harold's hospital forms with a steadiness she had not felt inside, but it had not signed away Whitmore Ridge. Diane, Martin said quietly, I heard you. We don't have the document yet, but someone saw it. Yes. Could they be mistaken? They could be, but with everything else we've found, we have to treat it seriously. Diane closed her eyes. She wanted to be furious. Fury would have been easier than the hollow feeling spreading through her chest. Ryan had not merely hidden things from her. He may have allowed strangers to believe she had consented to a future she had never chosen. What do I do now? She asked. First, you do not confront Ryan alone. Second, you preserve every communication. Third, you come back to my office with anything that might show your actual signature history. We may need samples. Samples. Yes. Checks, contracts, signed tax letters, farm agreements. Anything legitimate. Diane looked toward Harold's desk. I have years of them. Good. And Diane? Yes. If Ryan or Vanessa shows up with paperwork today, do not sign. Do not initial. Do not even write a note on the page. Tell them your attorney is reviewing all matters related to the farm. The sentence landed like a boundary she could hold in both hands. My attorney is reviewing all matters related to the farm, Diane repeated. Exactly. After the call ended, she sat very still. Outside, the horses moved quietly near the fence. A normal morning continued around an abnormal truth. That almost made it worse. The world should have looked different when betrayal became this clear. But the coffee maker still clicked. The refrigerator still hummed. The sun still rose over the fields as if nothing had been stolen. Diane stood and went to the office. She pulled out a banker's box from the closet and began sorting through old records. She worked methodically, signed feed contracts, veterinary agreements, boarding leases with adult clients, insurance forms, tax letters. Each page went into a folder labeled signature samples. The work steadied her again. That was what Ryan had forgotten. His mother was not helpless. She had been quiet because quiet kept peace, but peace and weakness were not the same thing. At 9:15, a car turned into the driveway. Not Ryan's truck, Vanessa's white SUV. Diane saw it from the office window and felt her body go still. The vehicle stopped near the house. Vanessa stepped out wearing a pale silk blouse, pants, and sunglasses too large for her face. She looked ready for photographs, not farm dust. A leather folder was tucked beneath one arm. Diane did not open the door immediately. She took her phone from the desk, turned on the voice memo app, and placed it face down on the bookshelf near the entry hall. Kentucky recording laws were not something she wanted to guess about, so she did not plan to use it secretly as a weapon. But she wanted a personal record of what was said, and she would ask Martin before doing anything with it. Then she opened the door. Vanessa smiled. It was the kind of smile people used when they wanted control without appearing rude. Diane, she said. I'm glad you're home. This is my home, Diane said. The smile flickered. Of course. May I come in? Diane looked at the leather folder. Why? Vanessa gave a small laugh. Because we need to clear the air before today gets any more emotional. Diane did not move aside. Ryan told me not to come to the wedding. Vanessa sighed as if Diane had misbehaved. That was not meant to hurt you. It did. I'm sorry you chose to receive it that way. There it was, an apology with the spine removed. Diane felt a calmness settle over her. Vanessa had expected tears, maybe anger, maybe a wounded old woman desperate to be included. She had not expected a locked door and a steady voice. "What do you want?" Diane asked. Vanessa's jaw tightened slightly. "We want today to go smoothly. Ryan is under tremendous pressure. My family is under pressure. There are people attending who matter for our future." "Our future?" "Ryan's future," Vanessa corrected quickly. "And mine." She held up the folder. "There are just a few planning documents we need you to acknowledge. Nothing major. Mostly confirming what everyone already understands." Diane looked at the folder as if it were something dirty tracked onto her porch. "What does everyone understand?" Vanessa removed her sunglasses. "That Ryan will eventually take over the farm." "Eventually is not today. No one said today. Then no document is needed today." Vanessa's expression cooled. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Diane almost smiled. Ryan had used nearly the same words. That told her they had rehearsed more than wedding vows. "My attorney is reviewing all matters related to the farm," Diane said. Vanessa froze. Only for a second. But Diane saw it. "Your attorney?" Vanessa asked. "Yes. Why would you involve an attorney in a family matter? Because someone made my property a business matter." Vanessa's face changed again. The softness disappeared. "Not completely, but enough. Diane, I know this is emotional for you. Let's not create embarrassment for Ryan today." "You mean more embarrassment than banning his mother from his wedding?" Vanessa's eyes sharpened. "That was Ryan's decision." The words were quick, too quick. Diane felt the wound twist. Vanessa had pushed, but Ryan had chosen. That mattered. Diane kept her voice quiet. "Then Ryan can explain it to me after my attorney reviews the documents." Vanessa put the folder back under her arm. "You may regret this." Diane did not answer. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There are people coming today who have invested time, money, and reputation based on Ryan's understanding of this situation. If you suddenly decide to act confused or difficult, you won't just hurt him. You'll humiliate him." Diane held the doorframe. She thought of Harold standing there years ago after long days, wiping mud from his boots before entering the house. She thought of every decision they had made together to keep the farm intact. She thought of Ryan laughing weakly, while others turned his mother into a problem to be managed. Then she looked at Vanessa. "You should leave." Vanessa stared at her. For the first time there was no charm left. "Fine," she said. "But don't pretend later that no one tried to handle this respectfully." Diane closed the door before Vanessa reached the SUV. Her hands trembled only after the lock clicked. She retrieved her phone and stopped the recording. Then she wrote a note immediately while the conversation remained fresh. Date, time. Vanessa arrived. Leather folder. Request for acknowledgement. Statement about investors. Threat of humiliation. She sent the note to Martin. Then she called him. When he answered, she said only, "Vanessa came here with documents." His response was immediate. "Did you sign anything?" "No." "Good. Did she leave them?" "No." "Did she mention investors?" "Yes." Martin exhaled. "That helps us. It didn't feel helpful. It may be later." Diane looked through the front window as Vanessa's SUV disappeared down the road. She said people invested time, money, and reputation. Martin paused. "Money?" That was her word. "Diane, listen carefully. If money has already changed hands based on representations about your property, today may not just be a family embarrassment." "What does that mean?" "It means Ryan and Vanessa may be standing in front of a room full of people tonight with promises they cannot legally keep." Diane looked toward the farm road, empty now, beneath the bright morning sun. A new message arrived while Martin was still on the line. This one was from an unknown number. She opened it and saw a photograph of a printed wedding program. Near the bottom of the reception schedule, beneath the 8:15 presentation line, someone had added a smaller note. Special acknowledgement from Diane Whitmore, retiring owner of Whitmore Ridge Farm. Diane stared at the photograph of the wedding program until the words seemed to detach from the paper. Special acknowledgement from Diane Whitmore, retiring owner of Whitmore Ridge Farm. Retiring owner, not current owner, not sole owner, not even mother of the groom. They had reduced her to a prop in a presentation she had never agreed to give. A smiling old woman meant to stand up, wave politely, and bless the future they had already sold in her name. Martin was still on the phone. "Diane," he said. "Who sent that?" "I don't know. Unknown number. Forward it to me." She did. Then she enlarged the photograph and studied it closely. The program sat on a round table covered in white linen. There was a champagne flute beside it and a gold place card just outside the edge of the frame. The photo had been taken at the venue, not printed from a computer screen. Someone's inside the wedding had sent it. That meant someone knew. Maybe someone had doubts. Maybe someone was warning her. Martin's voice cut through her thoughts. "This changes the urgency. I know. No, listen to me. If they printed your name into the program, they may intend to publicly imply your cooperation whether you attend or not. Diane's eyes moved toward the empty driveway where Vanessa's SUV had been minutes earlier. She came here to get me to sign something. Yes, and when you refused, they still had the program ready. The implications settled hard in Diane's stomach. They had prepared two versions of the truth, one where she signed and smiled, another where they spoke for her. Either way, they expected her to be silent. I'm going to the venue, Diane said. Not alone. I'm not going to make a scene. I believe you. That is not the issue. If they have investors there and printed materials naming you, you need a witness and documentation. I can meet you nearby. Diane looked at the clock. It was still before noon. The ceremony would begin soon. The reception would not start for hours. I thought I wasn't supposed to attend. You are not going as a guest, Martin said. You are going as the owner of property being misrepresented. That sentence steadied her more than kindness would have. She ended the call and immediately wrote down what had happened. The unknown number, the program photo, Vanessa's visit, the leather folder, the phrase about money and reputation. She saved the note and emailed it to Martin and Grace. Then she placed her copy folder inside a plain canvas bag. Before leaving, she paused at the kitchen doorway. The farmhouse looked ordinary, mug in the sink, boots by the back door, a basket of folded towels near the laundry room. It did not look like a place at the center of a scheme. Maybe that was why Ryan had thought he could do it. He had mistaken ordinary for unprotected. Diane walked upstairs and opened the safe. She did not remove the original deed. She only looked at it for a moment, closed the safe, and checked the lock twice. Then she changed into a dark dress, simple and clean, and pulled on her polished boots, not the polished image Vanessa wanted. The truth. As Diane drove toward Lexington, her phone rang again. This time it was Ryan. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, he called again, then Vanessa, then Ryan. Diane kept driving. At a red light, she checked her messages without opening them fully. Ryan had sent 4 texts. Mom, do not come here angry. Please don't embarrass me today. Vanessa is crying. Can you just be reasonable for once? Diane took screenshots at the stoplight and forwarded them to Martin when she parked outside a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the venue. Martin had told her to meet there instead of walking directly into the wedding. He arrived 10 minutes later carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the same gray suit he had worn at Harold's funeral. The sight of it tightened Diane's chest. He sat across from her in a corner booth. You look like you're holding together, he said. I am holding together. That is not the same thing. No, Diane admitted. It isn't. Martin opened his briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. I printed a property records certification request. It does not prove everything by itself, but it confirms what public records already show. You are the owner of record. Diane touched the folder lightly. Do we need it today? We may. He also handed her a letter on his office letterhead. This states that I represent you regarding all matters involving Whitmore Ridge Farm, and that no third party has authority to speak for you, negotiate transfer, or represent sale or redevelopment without written authorization from you. Diane read the letter slowly. It was calm, professional, dry, beautiful, no outrage, no begging, just boundaries in black ink. What do I do with it? If someone at the venue claims you agreed to anything, we provide a copy. If investors approach you, we provide a copy. If Ryan or Vanessa tries to pull you into a private room, you decline unless I am present. Diane nodded. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. This time it was a text. I am sorry. I work for the event planner. They were told you are giving a blessing and confirming the farm transition tonight. I thought you should know. Diane read it twice, then silently turned the phone toward Martin. His face hardened. Reply only once, he said. Ask if they can confirm what materials mention your name. Diane typed carefully. Thank you. I did not authorize any blessing, transition, sale, or presentation. If you have materials using my name, please preserve them. The response came quickly. There are printed programs, table cards for investors, and a slideshow file. Your name is on slide 14. Diane's hand went cold. Slide 14. They should made a slideshow, not a misunderstanding. Not a family exaggeration. A prepared presentation. Martin leaned forward. Ask one more thing. What? Ask whether the slide includes your signature or a quote. Diane typed the question. The answer took longer. Then it appeared. It says, with my blessing, Whitmore Ridge is ready for its next chapter. Underneath is your name. Diane set the phone down. For several seconds she could not hear the coffee shop around her. Cups clinked. People talked. A machine hissed behind the counter. None of it reached her clearly. With my blessing. They had taken not only her land, they had taken her voice. Martin closed his folder slowly. Diane, we are going to the venue. She looked at him. Now? Now. Before that presentation reaches a microphone, Diane stood. Her knees felt stiff, but they held. Martin walked beside her toward the door, not ahead of her, not behind her, beside her. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected off rows of cars parked near the wedding venue. Guests in suits and formal dresses moved through the entrance, laughing, adjusting ties, carrying gift bags. A celebration was unfolding in full color while the lie beneath it grew sharper by the minute. Diane stopped at the edge of the sidewalk. Across the street, near the venue's glass doors, Ryan stood with Vanessa. He was in a tuxedo. She was in white. They looked perfect. Then Ryan turned and saw his mother. His face changed instantly. Vanessa followed his gaze. For the first time since Diane had met her, Vanessa looked truly afraid. Diane did not wave. She did not hurry. She only adjusted the strap of her canvas bag, felt the folder of evidence against her side, and stepped off the curb with Martin beside her. Before she reached the entrance, her phone buzzed one more time. The event planner had sent a photo of slide 14. There, beneath the false blessing, was a scanned signature. Diane's signature, or something made to look like it. Diane stopped walking. For a moment, the noise from the wedding grounds faded into a dull blur. Guests crossed the entrance behind Ryan and Vanessa. Valets opened car doors. Laughter drifted across the parking area. Yet all Diane could see was the image on her phone. The signature looked almost right. Almost. The shape of the D. The long sweeps beneath Whitmore. The final curve at the end. To anyone who had never seen her handwriting, it would pass without question. To Diane, it felt like looking at her own face reflected in warped glass. Martin took the phone from her hand. You didn't sign this. No. You've never signed anything for them? No. He studied the image for another second, then somebody created it. Across the street, Ryan was already moving toward them. Vanessa grabbed his arm and spoke rapidly. Diane could not hear the words, but she saw the panic behind the smile. Vanessa immediately pasted back onto her face. The smile disappeared again when Diane resumed walking. Ryan reached them halfway to the entrance. Mom. Diane stopped. He looked exhausted despite the expensive tuxedo and careful grooming. His eyes kept darting toward the venue doors. Can we talk privately? No. His jaw tightened. Please, no. Martin stepped slightly forward. Anything you need to say can be said here. Ryan glanced at him with visible irritation. This is family. Martin's expression never changed. Then your family attorney can listen. Ryan looked back at Diane. For a brief moment, she saw something she had not seen in months. Fear. Not fear of losing his mother. Fear of losing control. Mom, Vanessa says there has been a misunderstanding. Diane pulled up the image. The fake signature? Ryan stared at the screen. The color drained from his face. It was subtle but unmistakable. He had seen it before. Diane noticed immediately. So did Martin. Ryan recovered quickly. I don't know anything about that. You've seen it. No, you recognized it. I didn't. The denial came too fast. Martin made no comment. He simply took notes in a small legal pad. Ryan noticed. His shoulders stiffened. You treating this like some lawsuit? Because someone is using my name. Mom, someone is using my property. Ryan rubbed a hand across his forehead. Guests continued entering the venue behind him. Several looked over curiously before continuing inside. We don't have time for this. The words landed harder than he intended. Diane heard them clearly. Not we need to fix this. Not let's understand what happened. We don't have time. The wedding mattered. The lie mattered. She did not. For years she might have excused it. Not anymore. I think we're done talking. She stepped around him. Ryan reached for her arm. Not aggressively, desperately, but Diane pulled away. The movement was small. The message was not. Ryan froze. The look on his face reminded her of the day Harold died. A man realizing something permanent had happened. Not because of death, because a boundary had finally appeared. Diane and Martin entered the venue lobby. The wedding ceremony itself had already begun in a separate hall. The reception staff were setting up the larger ballroom where guests would gather afterward. An event coordinator approached immediately. Can I help you? Diane showed her driver's license. My name is Diane Whitmore. Recognition flashed across the woman's face. Then uncertainty, then concern. You should come with me. That response alone told Diane enough. The coordinator already knew who she was supposed to be, and apparently who she wasn't supposed to be. The woman led them toward a small office near the ballroom. Once inside, she closed the door. My name is Amanda, she said quietly. I'm one of the planners. Diane recognized the voice immediately. The anonymous text sender. You contacted me. Amanda nodded. I did. Why? Amanda hesitated. Then she opened a folder. Inside were printed presentations materials, investor seating charts, event schedules. Promotional packets. Amanda slid one packet across the desk. Diane opened it. The first page showed a professional rendering of Whitmore Ridge Farm transformed into a luxury equestrian retreat. Restaurants, guest cottages, event facilities, corporate retreat space. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked approved. Everything looked sold. None of it belonged to Ryan. None of it belonged to Vanessa. Amanda pointed toward a paragraph near the bottom. Diane read it. Current ownership transition underway with family support. Future development partnership expected following ceremonial announcement. Her stomach tightened.
How many people receive these?
About 30. Investors? Amanda nodded. Business contacts, family associates, potential partners. Martin immediately photographed every page. Do not remove anything, he told Amanda. Preserve all originals. Amanda nodded. I already made copies. Martin looked up. Good. For the first time, Diane realized Amanda had probably taken a personal risk contacting them. Why did you help? Amanda looked embarrassed. My father owned a small machine shop. Diane waited. He lost it because relatives convinced him to trust paperwork he never understood. Silence filled the office. Amanda looked down. When I saw your name attached to all this, something felt wrong. Diane reached across the desk and gently squeezed her hand. Thank you. Amanda's eyes glistened briefly. Then she handed over one final document. This worried me most. Diane took it. A schedule, reception timeline, investor toast, development presentation, projected announcement, then a line highlighted in yellow, formal acknowledgement of ownership succession. Diane read it twice, then a third time, ownership succession. Not inheritance, not future plans, succession, present tense, as if control had already changed hands. Martin immediately requested a copy. Amanda provided one. Then she looked toward the hallway. They're about 30 minutes from finishing the ceremony. Diane nodded. Then we still have time. Amanda hesitated again. There is one more thing. Diane looked up. Amanda pulled out her phone. I wasn't sure if I should tell you. Tell me. Amanda opened a photograph taken earlier that morning. The image showed Vanessa's father seated at a reception table with two men in suits. One document lay open between them. Amanda zoomed in. The photograph was not perfect, but one line remained readable. Seller representative, Ryan Whitmore. The same phrase. The exact same phrase Martin had found on the land valuation request. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding, a pattern, a script, a role Ryan had been playing for months. Martin's expression darkened. Send me this image. Amanda immediately did. Diane sat back slowly. The evidence pile was growing, but so was the pain. Every document answered one question and created another. How long had Ryan been participating? How many conversations had happened without her? How many promises had been made using land that wasn't his? Her phone vibrated, a voicemail notification. Ryan again. Diane almost ignored it. Then she pressed play. His voice came through low and strained. Mom, please don't talk to anyone until I explain. Vanessa's dad handled most of the investor stuff. I didn't know everything that was being said. Diane listened carefully, then replayed it. Martin listened too. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Diane looked up. He didn't say he didn't know. Martin nodded. He said he didn't know everything. A lawyer's ear caught details most people missed, and that detail mattered. Ryan was already narrowing his denial, already creating distance between himself and the scheme, already preparing someone else to blame. Diane saved the voicemail, backed it up, forwarded it to Martin. Then she slipped her phone into her purse. Outside the office door, applause suddenly erupted from somewhere deeper inside the venue. The ceremony was over. Guests were beginning to move toward the reception area. Amanda looked toward the hallway. They're coming. Diane rose slowly from her chair. The hurt remained, the humiliation remained. But something else stood beside it now, preparation. She picked up the investor packet. Martin gathered the copies. The ballroom doors began opening. Voices filled the corridor. Then Diane heard Vanessa laughing, confident again, certain that the reception still belonged to her. Amanda glanced toward the entrance and suddenly went pale. What is it? Diane asked. Amanda swallowed, then pointed toward the far end of the hallway. A large display screen had already been activated for arriving guests. Slide after slide rotated automatically. Farm photographs, development renderings, investment projections. And now, visible to everyone entering the ballroom, appeared the forged blessing. Diane Whitmore's name, the fake signature, and directly beneath it, a sentence she had never seen before. Pending transfer documents executed June 14. Diane stared at the screen, June 14. 6 days ago. The date meant only one thing. Somebody wasn't just forging her signature, somebody was claiming she had already signed the transfer paperwork. Diane stared at the screen while guests streamed into the ballroom beneath it. Nobody stopped to question the slide. Nobody knew they were looking at a lie. The forged signature glowed against a clean white background. The sentence beneath it carried the confidence of a completed transaction, pending transfer documents executed June 14. Amanda looked sick. Martin immediately raised his phone and photographed the display from multiple angles. "Get the full screen. Get the date. Get the event branding," Diane said. Her voice sounded calmer than she felt. Inside, something cold had settled into place. This was no longer about being excluded from a wedding. Someone had built an entire public story around paperwork that did not exist. Martin finished taking photos. "Good," he said quietly. "Very good." Diane glanced at him. "Good? For evidence." The ballroom doors continued opening. Guests entered laughing, carrying champagne glasses, admiring floral arrangements and expensive decorations. Many stopped briefly to admire the development presentation. Some pointed toward renderings of Whitmore Ridge Farm. Some took photographs. The lie was spreading in real time. Diane felt the sting of humiliation again. Not because strangers believed the story, because Ryan had allowed it. Months ago, he could have corrected it. Weeks ago, he could have stopped it. Even this morning, he could have told the truth. Instead, he had watched it grow. Amanda checked her schedule. "The investor presentation starts in 25 minutes. Martin nodded. "That gives us enough time." Diane turned toward him. "Enough time for what?" "To learn whether this fake transfer document exists somewhere besides a slideshow." That possibility struck harder than she expected. If someone had fabricated actual paperwork, the situation was becoming far more serious. Martin looked toward Amanda, who handled the presentation materials. Amanda answered immediately. "Vanessa approved everything. And the files?" "Mostly Vanessa, sometimes her father." "Did Ryan review them?" Amanda hesitated. "At least some of them." Diane noticed the hesitation. "You saw him." Amanda nodded reluctantly, twice. The answer hurt, not because it proved guilt, because it proved participation. Ryan had been present. He had watched materials being prepared. He had seen documents describing ownership changes, yet somehow he expected Diane to believe he knew almost nothing. Martin made another note. Then Amanda's phone vibrated. She checked it and frowned. "What is it?" Diane asked. "One of the catering managers." Amanda looked uncomfortable. "He says Vanessa is asking if anyone has seen me." Martin exchanged a glance with Diane. Vanessa had noticed something. Not everything, but enough. Amanda straightened nervously. "If she asked directly, I don't know what to tell her." "Tell the truth," Diane said. Amanda blinked. "The truth? That you performed your job." For several seconds, Amanda simply stared. Then she smiled faintly. The tension in her shoulders eased. Diane realized how many people spent their lives being pressured to protect lies that were not theirs. She understood that feeling better than most. Amanda left to handle her responsibilities. Diane and Martin moved toward a quieter hallway overlooking part of the reception floor. From there they could observe without being immediately noticed. Guests continued arriving, investors mixed with relatives. Business cards exchanged hands, champagne flowed. The atmosphere felt less like a wedding and more like a business launch. That detail did not escape Diane. Several conversations drifted upward from below. She caught fragments. Beautiful property. Huge potential. Prime location. Development rights. Nobody discussed horses. Nobody discussed Harold. Nobody discussed the decades of work that built Whitmore Ridge. Only profit. Only opportunity. Only ownership. Ownership that belonged to Diane. A familiar voice suddenly echoed from below. Vanessa. She stood near the center of the room greeting guests. Perfect hair. Perfect smile, perfect confidence. If she felt pressure, she hid it well. Ryan stood beside her, less confident, less composed. Every few minutes he checked his phone. Every few minutes he scanned the room, looking for Diane, looking for danger, looking for a problem that refused to disappear. Martin noticed it too. He knows something is wrong. He should. Martin folded his arms. He also knows more than he's admitting. Diane said nothing, because she knew that already. The difficult question was how much more. Her phone vibrated. A text message arrived from an unknown number. She opened it cautiously. The message contained only a photograph, nothing else. Diane frowned. The image showed a conference table, several folders, coffee cups, and 3 people. Ryan, Vanessa, Vanessa's father. The timestamp appeared in the corner. 3 weeks earlier, Diane enlarged the image. Her heartbeat quickened. One folder lay open. Visible on the cover was a title, Whitmore Ridge Transfer Strategy. She stared. Martin leaned closer. "Who sent it?" "I don't know." Another message arrived, this time with text. "Thought you should see this before they make announcements." No name, no explanation, no signature, only the photo. And then a second image arrived. Diane opened it. This one was clearer, taken from farther away, the same meeting, the same participants, but now she could see a projection screen behind them. A slide was visible. Most of the text was unreadable. One line wasn't. Owner transition timeline. Ryan sat directly beneath it, looking completely comfortable. Not confused, not misled. Comfortable. Diane saved both images immediately, then forwarded them to Martin. He studied them carefully. These aren't proof yet, I know, but they suggest planning. 3 weeks ago, at least. The words settled heavily between them. At least, meaning the scheme might be older, much older. A new voice interrupted them. Diane? She turned. Grace Lowell stood at the end of the hallway. Her accountant looked winded from moving quickly through the crowded venue. She carried a folder under one arm. I came as fast as I could. Diane blinked. You drove all the way here? You sounded concerned. Grace handed over the folder. I checked something. Martin immediately focused. What? Grace opened the folder. Inside were copies of business filings, bank registration records, public corporate documents. Most looked familiar, one did not. Grace slid a single page forward. Look at the mailing address. Diane read it, her chest tightened. The mailing address for Whitmore Ridge Development LLC was not Vanessa's apartment, not Ryan's apartment, not a business office. It was Whitmore Ridge Farm itself, her farm, used without permission, used as company headquarters, used as the official contact address. Grace looked grim. I confirmed it this afternoon. Martin slowly exhaled. They've been representing the farm as operationally connected to the company. Grace nodded. That's how it appears. Diane felt another piece fall into place. Every lie had been built upon another. The wedding, the investors, the fake ownership, the valuation request, the company address, the forged signature. None of it was spontaneous. It was a structure, a carefully assembled structure, and someone had spent months building it. Music suddenly rose from the ballroom. Guests began taking their seats. The presentation schedule was advancing. Amanda hurried toward them from across the room. Her face had gone pale again. Diane, what happened? Amanda swallowed. I just overheard Vanessa. The hallway seemed to narrow. What did she say? Amanda looked around before answering. She was talking to her father. Martin stepped closer, and Amanda lowered her voice. She said if the announcement happens before Diane speaks, the investors will already be committed. Silence followed. The words hung in the air, calculated, deliberate, not confusion, not misunderstanding. Timing. They were racing against the truth. Amanda continued. Then her father told her not to worry. Diane's stomach tightened. What exactly did he say? Amanda met her eyes. He said, by the time anyone checks the paperwork, the commitments will already be signed. The music grew louder. Guests applauded below. The investor presentation was beginning. And for the first time, Diane realized they weren't simply planning to lie about ownership. They were counting on locking people into agreements before the truth could catch up. Diane did not wait for the presentation to begin. She turned to Martin and said, stop the screen. Amanda was already moving. She crossed the hallway quickly, speaking into her headset in a low, urgent voice. A second later, the rotating slideshow froze on a photograph of the farm's front pasture. Then the screen went black. The sudden absence of light drew attention immediately. Several guests looked up. A few murmured. Someone near the bar asked if the projector had failed. Below, Vanessa's head snapped toward the display. Ryan turned too. Diane saw both of them understand at the same moment. The screen had not failed. Someone had interfered. Amanda returned, pale but composed. The technician cut the feed. He'll hold until I tell him otherwise. Thank you, Diane said. Martin checked his watch. We need to decide how far we go before investors gather formally. Diane looked through the glass toward the ballroom. People were still smiling, still drinking, still unaware that the evening's polished program had been built on a false signature and a stolen voice. She did not want a scene. She wanted facts. But Vanessa and Ryan had chosen a public room. They had placed Diane's name on a public screen. They had put a lie in front of guests and investors before Diane ever stepped into the building. Now silence would only serve them. First, Diane said, I want the venue to preserve every file. Amanda nodded. I can ask the AV team to duplicate the slideshow and print the final schedule. Do that, Martin said. And email copies directly to me if your company policy allows it. If not, preserve them and document who requested the materials. Amanda hurried away again. Grace stood beside Diane, folder pressed against her chest. They'll try to call this confusion. I know. Then we need something that is not emotional. Diane looked at Martin. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the letter confirming his representation, then the certified ownership record. This is enough to stop a presentation. It is not enough to prove who forged what. But we do not need to prove the forgery tonight to stop them from using your name. That distinction mattered. Diane did not have to solve the whole crime before defending herself. She did not have to understand every lie before refusing to participate in one. Ryan was approaching now, moving fast across the ballroom floor. Vanessa followed, smiling at guests as she passed them, trying to make her urgency look graceful. Her father, Charles Caldwell, stood near the investor tables watching with narrowed eyes. Ryan reached the hallway first. "Mom, what are you doing?" Diane faced him fully. "Protecting my property." His eyes flicked toward Martin, then Grace, then the folder in Diane's hand. "This is insane. You can't just walk in here and interfere with my wedding. You put my name on the program." Ryan swallowed. "You put my signature on a slide. I didn't make the slide." "But you saw it." He looked away. That was answer enough. Vanessa arrived beside him, breathless but still controlled. "Diane, this is exactly what we were trying to avoid. You're confused, and now you're upsetting everyone." Diane felt the insult land. Confused. There it was again. The word meant to shrink her. The word meant to make her sound old, fragile, unreliable. A woman who needed to be managed, not heard. Martin stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitmore is not confused. I represent her. No party here has authority to use her name, signature, property, or consent in connection with any transfer, investment, redevelopment, or ownership succession involving Whitmore Ridge Farm." Vanessa's face tightened. Ryan stared at the letter in Martin's hand. "Why are you doing this to me?" he asked Diane. The question hit the old soft place in her heart. For a second, she saw the son she had loved through every hard season. But the man in front of her was not asking what he had done. He was asking why she had stopped absorbing it. "I didn't put a fake signature on a screen," she said. Ryan flinched. Vanessa's voice dropped. "Careful." Diane turned to her. "No, you be careful." The words came out low, but they changed the air around them. Vanessa blinked. It was the first time Diane had spoken to her without softness. Charles Caldwell approached with two men in suits behind him. One of the men carried an investor packet. The other had a phone in his hand and a deep frown on his face. "What seems to be the issue?" Charles asked. Martin answered before Diane could. "The issue is that my client has not authorized any transfer, presentation, investment commitment, or ownership statement regarding Whitmore Ridge Farm." The man with the packet looked sharply at Ryan. "Ryan, what is he talking about?" Ryan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Vanessa stepped in quickly. "This is a family timing issue. Diane has been under stress, and we were going to explain everything after the ceremony." Diane reached into her folder and removed the certified ownership record. She handed it to Martin, who handed it to the investor. "I am Diane Whitmore," she said. "I am the sole owner of Whitmore Ridge Farm. I have not signed transfer documents. I have not approved redevelopment. I have not given Ryan, Vanessa, or Mr. Caldwell authority to represent my land." The investor read the document. His expression changed, not dramatically, worse. Professionally, he turned to Ryan. "We were told succession was already underway." Ryan's face reddened. "It is. It was going to be. This is complicated." "No," Diane said. "It is simple. Future inheritance is not ownership." The second investor lowered his phone. "Then what exactly did we commit funds toward?" The hallways went silent. Vanessa looked at her father. Charles's jaw tightened. "No one committed funds. These were preliminary discussions." "That is not what your packet says," Grace said quietly. Everyone turned toward her. Grace opened her folder and removed the LLC registration, the mailing address page, and the investor event material. Her hands were steady. This company used the farm address. It used the farm name. It represented a development path connected to property Mrs. Whitmore owns. At minimum, that is misleading. Charles took one step toward her. "And you are?" "Her accountant." His expression hardened with annoyance, as though honest records were a personal insult. The investor with the packet looked back at Ryan. "Did you accept commitment fees?" Ryan's face changed. Diane saw it. So did Martin. Vanessa spoke first. "Those were reservation deposits for future planning capacity." "That was not my question," the investor said. Ryan looked trapped now. He glanced toward the ballroom, where more guests had begun watching. The wedding was no longer a beautiful private celebration. It was becoming a room full of witnesses. Diane felt no pleasure in that. Only grief. This was her son, her only son, and he was standing there in a tuxedo, caught between the truth and the image he had chosen over her. Martin's voice remained calm. "Any financial questions should be addressed through counsel after tonight. For now, the presentation cannot proceed using Mrs. Whitmore's name or property." Charles Caldwell gave a cold laugh. "You can't walk into a private wedding and shut down a business presentation." Diane looked at him. "I can when the business presentation is about my land." Amanda returned carrying a flash drive and a printed packet. I have the slideshow copy and the final presentation handout. Martin took them. Thank you. Vanessa looked furious. Amanda, you had no right. Amanda's face went pale, but she did not back down. I had a responsibility. The sentence landed quietly but firmly. Diane wanted to remember it. A responsibility, not to power, not to charm, not to family pressure, to the truth. The investor turned to Charles. I want to see the signed documents you referenced. Charles's expression froze. Ryan looked down. Vanessa stopped breathing for half a second. Diane caught it. The silence told her there was no clean answer. Then the ballroom microphone crackled. A DJ's voice came through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could have your attention, the bride and groom have asked everyone to take their seats for a special presentation. Diane turned toward the ballroom. The screen lit up again. Not black this time, not frozen. Someone had restarted the presentation from another control station. The first slide appeared above the room. Whitmore Ridge, the next chapter. And beneath the title, in elegant script, were the words, "With the blessing of Diane Whitmore." Diane looked at the screen as the words brightened above a room full of guests. With the blessing of Diane Whitmore, the sentence was elegant, clean, completely false. For one brief second, she felt the old instinct rise inside her. Step back, avoid embarrassment, let the wedding continue. Handle it quietly later. That was what a mother did. That was what a woman of her generation had been trained to do in a family crisis. Swallow the insult so everyone else could keep smiling. Then she looked at Ryan. He stood near the hallway entrance, frozen, watching the slide like a man watching a match touch dry grass. His face was not shocked. It was terrified. He had known enough. Diane stepped forward. Martin moved with her. Vanessa reacted first. She rushed toward the ballroom doorway, lifting one hand toward the DJ booth. "It's fine," she called, her voice bright and sharp. "Please continue. Just a small technical delay." "No," Diane said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. Several nearby guests turned. The DJ hesitated, one hand hovering over the controls. Vanessa spun toward her. "Diane, stop." Diane did not stop. She walked into the ballroom with Martin at her side and Grace a few steps behind. The room softened into confused silence as more guests noticed the older woman in the dark dress and boots crossing the polished floor. She did not look like the image Vanessa had tried to sell. She looked real. That made the room stare harder. The screen still displayed the title slide. The false blessing hovered above her head as she approached the front. The irony was so bitter she nearly tasted it. Ryan reached her before she could get to the microphone. "Mom," he whispered. "Please, not here." Diane looked at him. "You put me here." His mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't know they were going to use that slide." "They?" He looked toward Vanessa. Diane followed his gaze. Vanessa's face tightened with rage, but she kept her smile for the audience. Diane understood then. Ryan was already looking for somewhere to place the blame. A server stepped aside as Diane reached the small stage area prepared for the presentation. The microphone stood waiting beside a laptop, a remote, and a stack of polished brochures. Diane picked up one brochure, Whitmore Ridge, the next chapter. She opened it and saw her farm divided into phases, drawings, investment terms, projected guest capacity, and references to family succession. Her hands did not shake. She set the brochure down and reached for the microphone. Vanessa moved quickly. "No, this is not appropriate." Martin stepped between them. "Mrs. Whitmore has every right to correct unauthorized statements using her name and property." Charles Caldwell appeared behind Vanessa, his expression hard. "This is a private event." Diane turned toward him. "It was private until you put my land on the screen." The room went quiet, not silent yet. Quiet enough to listen. Diane lifted the microphone. The first sound was a soft crackle through the speakers. Every face turned toward her. She did not make a speech, not at first. She needed only the truth. "My name is Diane Whitmore," she said. "I own Whitmore Ridge Farm." A murmur moved through the guests. She looked toward the screen. "The statement above me is false. I did not give my blessing for any transfer, sale, redevelopment, investment commitment, or ownership succession involving my farm." The murmur grew louder. Vanessa whispered something harsh to Ryan. Ryan stared at the floor. Diane continued. "I was not invited to this wedding today. My son told me last night that my presence would make people uncomfortable. That was painful, but it was a family matter. This is no longer only a family matter." A man near the investor table stood. Diane recognized him from the packet as Grant Mercer. "Whitmore," he said, "are you saying Ryan Whitmore has no authority to negotiate on behalf of the property?" "That is exactly what I am saying." The words landed like glass breaking. The guests shifted. Several people opened brochures in their laps. Others reached for their phones. Charles stepped forward. This is a misunderstanding. Mrs. Whitmore is emotional. This is a significant day for the family, and she was understandably hurt by a seating decision. Diane looked at him. A seating decision. He had taken a son banning his mother from a wedding and turned it into furniture. The humiliation cut deep, but this time it sharpened her. My attorney is present, Diane said. So is my accountant. Public property records identify me as the sole owner. Any documents suggesting otherwise should be reviewed carefully before anyone relies on them. Martin held up his letter without theatrics. Grace stood beside him, calm and unsmiling. Grant Mercer turned toward Ryan. We were told succession paperwork was executed June 14th. Ryan looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at her father. Charles looked furious. No one looked honest. Diane took in the chain of glances. There it was, clearer than any confession. They all knew pieces. Maybe not the same pieces. Maybe not equally, but enough. Ryan finally spoke. Mom, I was going to talk to you after the wedding. The sentence broke something open inside her. After? Her voice remained quiet, but the room heard it. After you announced my land? After you used my name? After you told people documents were executed? Ryan's face flushed. I thought we could work it out. You thought I would give in. He said nothing. Diane nodded once. That silence was answer enough. Vanessa grabbed the microphone stand with one hand, no longer pretending grace. This is ridiculous. Diane has been resisting sick planning for months. Ryan is her only heir. Everyone knows the farm will eventually be his. Diane turned toward her. Eventually is not ownership. The same sentence she had said earlier to Ryan now filled the ballroom. Somebody near the back whispered, "Oh my God." Vanessa's eyes flashed. You are humiliating your own son. No, Diane said. He did that when he used his mother's property to impress strangers. Ryan flinched like she had slapped him. For a moment, Diane regretted the pain in his eyes. Then she remembered the empty chair, the text, the fake blessing, the signature. Regret passed. Dignity stayed. Martin leaned in and spoke softly near the microphone, just loud enough for the room. Any party who has received investment materials referencing Whitmore Ridge Farm should preserve those materials. Mrs. Whitmore disputes all unauthorized claims of transfer, authority, consent, or succession. That changed the room completely. The wedding guests had been curious. The investors became alert. Phones came out. Packets closed. Whispers turned practical. Legal words had entered the celebration, and they did not leave room for fantasy. Charles Caldwell stepped toward Martin. You're making a mistake. Martin met his stare evenly. Then you can explain that in writing. Vanessa's father stopped. Diane noticed the hesitation. It was small, but it was there. Amanda appeared near the AV station and turned off the screen again. This time no one restarted it. The ballroom lights seemed brighter without the lie glowing above them. Grant Mercer approached the stage with two other investors. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, were you aware that Whitmore Ridge Development accepted preliminary commitment funds? The question moved through the room like a blade. Diane felt the floor steady beneath her boots. No, she said, I was not. Ryan closed his eyes. Vanessa went pale. Charles's jaw locked. Grant looked down at his packet, then back at Ryan. We need to see an accounting. Ryan's voice cracked. This is not the time. Grant's expression hardened. It became the time when your mother had to stop your presentation. The sentence struck Ryan visibly. Diane lowered the microphone. Her hand finally trembled, but only slightly. She had not come to destroy his wedding. She had come to stop a lie. Ryan looked at her, and for the first time that day she saw something beneath the panic. Shame, not enough, but real. Then Vanessa turned on him in a whisper that carried farther than she intended. You said she would never do this. The words reached Diane. They reached Martin. They reached the nearest investors. Ryan's head snapped toward Vanessa. Diane felt her breath stop, not because Vanessa had accused him, because Vanessa had just answered the question Diane had carried all day. Ryan had not merely hoped his mother would stay quiet. He had promised it. Diane heard Vanessa's whisper as clearly as if it had been spoken into the microphone. You said she would never do this. The room did not explode all at once. It shifted. First the closest guests turned toward Vanessa, then the investors, then Ryan. A whisper could travel farther than a shout when everyone was already listening. Ryan's face went slack. Vanessa realized what she had said a second too late. Charles Caldwell stepped forward immediately. That is enough. This conversation has become inappropriate for a wedding reception. Grant Mercer did not look at him. He looked at Ryan. Mr. Whitmore, did you represent that your mother would not object to this transaction? Ryan swallowed. It wasn't a transaction. Grant held up the packet. Then why did your materials contain commitment terms? Vanessa snapped. They were preliminary. Martin turned toward her. Preliminary financial commitments tied to land you do not own. Her mouth shut. Diane stood quietly, still holding the microphone. Her first instinct was to feel sorry for Ryan. He looked cornered and ashamed, a groom surrounded by suspicion before the first toast had even been poured. But then she looked up at the screen that had carried her forged blessing only minutes earlier. That sympathy hardened into something more useful, clarity. She lowered the microphone and handed it to Martin. I don't need to say more right now. Ryan stared at her. Mom, wait. No. The word was small, but it stopped him. Diane stepped off the platform and walked toward the investor tables. Grace followed, handing out copies of Martin's representation letter and the certified property record to those who asked. She did not argue. She did not accuse. She simply placed facts into the hands of people who had been given fantasy. The ballroom lost its wedding glow. Guests stood awkwardly beside untouched champagne. Flowers towered over tables, prepared for celebration, but people had stopped admiring them. Conversations turned low and sharp. Business voices replaced family laughter. Grant Mercer took the letter from Grace and read every line. Another investor, a woman in a navy gown, asked Martin whether Diane had authorized the use of the farm address for the LLC. No, Martin said. She did not. The woman's expression went cold. Charles Caldwell's face darkened. You people are turning a family misunderstanding into a legal spectacle. Diane turned toward him. You made my farm a spectacle before I walked into this building. Charles looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time, not as the inconvenient mother, not as an aging farm woman, as the obstacle he should have respected sooner. Vanessa moved close to Ryan and hissed something Diane could not hear. Ryan shook his head once, sharply. It was the first sign of resistance Diane had seen from him all day. Then Grant spoke again. I want an accounting of every dollar received in connection with Whitmore Ridge development. Ryan rubbed both hands over his face. Now? Yes, now. Vanessa's voice rose. This is our wedding. Grant looked around the room, then back at her. Then you should not have turned it into an investor meeting. Several guests heard that. A fresh ripple moved through the room. Vanessa's perfect composure cracked. She looked toward her father, but Charles was already speaking with two men near the bar. His voice was low and urgent. He was no longer trying to comfort his daughter or steady Ryan. He was managing exposure. Diane noticed. So did Martin. Martin leaned toward her. He is trying to contain the investors. Can he? Not if money changed hands. Diane looked at Ryan. He stood alone now, Vanessa a step away from him, her father farther still. For the first time that day, Ryan looked less like a groom and more like a man watching a stage collapse beneath his feet. He approached Diane slowly. Mom, he said. Please, just talk to me in private. Diane did not move. You had months to talk to me in private. I didn't know it had gone this far. That isn't the same as not knowing. He looked stricken. She had learned that distinction from Martin, but now it belonged to her. Ryan lowered his voice. Vanessa's dad handled the investor side. He said it was just interest, no obligations, no harm. And my signature? Ryan looked away. The silence was brutal. Diane felt a pressure in her chest. Ryan. He blinked hard. I didn't forge it. She studied him. The denial sounded frightened, not false, but after everything, she no longer trusted the relief that tried to rise inside her. Did you know it existed? His lips parted. No answer came. Diane stepped back. That was the answer. Ryan's eyes filled. I saw it once. I asked Vanessa about it. She said it was just for mock-up purposes, that nobody would think it was real until you signed the final version. Diane stared at him. You saw my name being used on a document I had not signed. It was a draft, Ryan. His face crumpled. I wanted it to work. The words came out small. There it was. Not malice, not full confession, something almost worse, want. He wanted the beautiful life, the wealthy in-laws, the clean version of himself. The future where mud and debt and his mother's stubborn dignity did not complicate anything, so he had looked away. Diane's voice softened, but only a little. You wanted it enough to risk my home. He did not correct her. A commotion rose near the investor tables. Grace turned toward it first. One of the men in suits was showing his phone to Grant Mercer. His face was pale. Martin, Grace called. Martin moved quickly. Diane followed close enough to hear. The man with the phone said, This is a wire confirmation. Our office sent a preliminary reservation payment to Whitmore Ridge Development 2 weeks ago. Vanessa snapped. Reservation, not investment. Grant looked at her. For access to land Mrs. Whitmore says you do not control. The man held up his phone. $25,000. The number moved through the nearby crowd. Diane felt cold. Money had changed hands. Not vague interest, not future dreams, actual money. Martin's expression remained composed, but his eyes sharpened. Was Mrs. Whitmore disclosed as the actual owner? The man looked at his phone again. The memo says Farm Transition Partnership. Diane closed her eyes briefly. Farm Transition Partnership. Another phrase designed to sound official without saying the truth. Then the woman in the navy gown spoke. Our firm sent $10,000 as a due diligence hold. Another investor added, we paid for site review priority. Amounts began surfacing one after another. Not enormous enough to be sensational. Large enough to matter. Large enough to show reliance. Large enough to turn lies into consequences. Ryan looked like he might be sick. Vanessa stepped back from him. Charles Caldwell suddenly moved toward the exit. Diane saw him, so did Grant Mercer. Mr. Caldwell. Grant called sharply. Charles stopped. Slowly he turned. Grant's voice was controlled. Do not leave. We need to discuss the funds routed through your contacts. Charles gave a thin smile. I have nothing to discuss in a hallway. Martin took one step forward, then preserve every document. Because if funds were collected using my client's property without authorization, this will not end tonight. The room went silent again. Diane looked from Martin to the investors to Ryan. This was the line. Before this moment, it had still been possible for everyone to pretend it was misunderstanding, ambition, family pressure, poor wording. Now there were payments, names, dates, wires. Diane felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. Justice was no longer a dramatic confrontation. It was paperwork. It was consequences. It was the slow closing of every door Ryan and Vanessa thought they had left open. Her phone buzzed. Amanda had sent another file. Diane opened it. It was a PDF labeled Commitment Ledger. Her eyes moved down the page. Names, amounts, dates, notes. Then she saw a line near the bottom that made her hand tighten around the phone. Caldwell Consulting Fee, $18,500 paid from Whitmore Ridge Development account. Diane looked up at Charles Caldwell, who was still standing near the exit. The father of the bride had not just promoted the lie, he had already been paid from it. Diane kept her eyes on Charles Caldwell. He stood near the ballroom exit with one hand resting against the doorframe, frozen between leaving and staying. The consulting fee on her phone sat like a quiet accusation. $18,500 paid from an account built around her farm to a man who had spent the evening pretending this was only a misunderstanding. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Mr. Caldwell, she said, why did Whitmore Ridge Development pay you a consulting fee? The question cut through the noise. Charles turned slowly. Vanessa's face went white. Ryan looked from Diane to Charles, confusion breaking through his panic. What fee? Ryan asked. No one answered him. Diane handed the phone to Martin, who looked at the ledger Amanda had sent. His expression did not change, but the room around him seemed to tighten. Grant Mercer stepped closer. There was a consulting fee? Martin spoke calmly. According to this ledger, Caldwell Consulting received $18,500 from Whitmore Ridge Development. Charles lifted his chin. For preliminary strategic services. Strategic services connected to property you did not control? Grace asked. His gaze snapped toward her. Diane could see his contempt for Grace as clearly as if he had spoken it aloud. He did not like women with folders. He did not like accountants. He did not like records. Records did not care whether he liked them. Ryan turned toward Vanessa. You told me your father wasn't taking anything. Vanessa grabbed his arm. Not now. Yes, now, Ryan said, louder than before. Several guests looked over. For the first time all night, Ryan's anger was not pointed at Diane. It was pointed at the woman beside him. Vanessa's eyes flashed. You signed off on the company account. Ryan went still. Diane felt that sentence land in the room. Martin looked at him. You had control of the account? Ryan's mouth opened. Vanessa spoke over him. He was the managing member. Of course he had access. Ryan looked trapped. Diane's heart clenched despite everything. Not because he was innocent. He was not. But because he had finally stepped into the machine he helped build and felt the gears closing around him. Grant's voice turned colder. Then both of you can provide a full accounting. Charles moved away from the exit, his polished calm returning piece by piece. This is unnecessary. Any funds received were administrative. Fully refundable. Nobody has lost anything. Then refund them, the woman in the navy gown said. Charles looked at her. She held his stare. Tonight, she added. The silence that followed was answer enough. Diane saw it before anyone said it. The money was not sitting untouched in an account. It had already moved. Some to consulting fees, some perhaps to wedding costs, some to expenses hidden behind soft words like planning, capacity, and strategic services. Ryan saw it too. His face changed. Vanessa, he said quietly. Where's the money? She did not answer. Vanessa. Her voice came out sharp. Do not embarrass me in front of everyone. Diane almost closed her eyes. There it was again. Not remorse, not truth, embarrassment. That had been the center of everything from the beginning. Diane's boots were embarrassing. The farm was embarrassing. The truth was embarrassing. And now consequences were embarrassing too. Amanda approached Martin with another printed sheet. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I found the payment summary attached to the vendor packet." Martin took it. Diane watched his eyes move down the page. "What is it?" she asked. Martin hesitated for the first time, then he handed her the sheet. Several charges were listed under Whitmore Ridge Development promotional expenses, reception investor materials, private cocktail upgrade, audio-visual package, custom signage, printed programs. A line near the bottom made Diane's throat tighten. Bridal suite hospitality allocation $6,200. Vanessa saw where Diane was looking and stepped forward. "That was temporary." Diane looked up slowly. "You used investor money tied to my farm to pay wedding costs. It was all part of the event," Vanessa snapped. The wedding and the presentation were connected. The room heard her, every word. Ryan whispered, "Vanessa, stop," but she did not stop. She was too angry now, too cornered. The woman who had carefully edited every image and every sentence had lost control of the room, and without control, her elegance thinned into something hard. "You don't understand what it takes to build something," Vanessa said to Diane. "You sit on that land like it's some sacred little memory, while everyone else sees what it could be." Diane absorbed the insult without flinching. "I know what it takes to build something," she said. "That is why I know the difference between building and taking." That sentence brought the room completely still. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Ryan looked at Diane as if he had never truly heard her before. Charles tried to regain control. "This is emotional rhetoric. No one has taken land. No deed has transferred. No sale has closed." Martin nodded once. "Correct, which is why Mrs. Whitmore is stopping the unauthorized representation before greater harm occurs." Grant looked toward the other investors. "We are suspending any further involvement pending document review." The woman in navy added, "and requesting return of funds." One by one, the investors began nodding. The business fantasy collapsed, not with shouting but with professional distance. Emails were opened, phones came out, assistants were called, the room filled with quiet consequence. Diane watched it happen and felt no triumph. Only exhaustion. This was not revenge served cold, it was rot exposed to air. Ryan took a step toward her. "Mom," Diane did not step back, but she did not soften either. "I swear I didn't know about the fake signature. You knew enough to let them use my name." His eyes reddened. "I thought it was temporary. Temporary lies still hurt people." He looked down. "And they hurt you," he said. Diane waited. It was the first thing he had said all day that sounded like a beginning. Not enough, but a beginning. Then Vanessa laughed once, bitterly. "Oh, please, don't act noble now, Ryan. You were happy when they called you the future owner. You were happy when they treated you like somebody." Ryan turned sharply. "At least I didn't forge her signature." Vanessa froze. So did the room. Diane's breath caught. Charles Caldwell's face hardened instantly. "Ryan," he warned, but the damage was already done. Ryan stared at Vanessa. The words had escaped before he could pull them back, and now they hung there under the chandeliers with all the weight of an accusation. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You do not want to do this." Ryan's voice shook. "Did you?" She said nothing. Diane felt her pulse in her throat. Martin leaned closer to her. "Do not ask questions. Let them talk." Diane stayed silent. It was one of the hardest things she had ever done. Ryan took another step toward Vanessa. "Did you use her signature?" Vanessa's face twisted with anger. "You gave me the file." "What file?" "The scanned paperwork from her office." Ryan looked stunned. "I gave you old records so your father could review taxes, and you thought that was different?" Vanessa shot back. "You wanted this deal as much as I did." Charles moved quickly between them. Enough. Grant's phone was already out, recording openly now. The woman in navy was taking notes. Amanda stood near the wall, pale but steady. Grace's eyes met Diane's. The room had shifted again. For several chapters of her life, Diane had been the one outside the circle, outside the wedding, outside the family image, outside the future they imagined. Now they were turning on each other inside the lie. Diane still held the microphone loosely in her hand. She raised it just enough for her voice to carry. "I am leaving this room now. My attorney will handle every document, every dollar, and every false statement connected to my property." Ryan turned toward her, desperate. "Mom, please don't go." Diane looked at him. "Why?" His face crumpled. He had no answer that did not begin with needing something from her. That hurt more than she expected. Before she could lower the microphone, Charles Caldwell spoke from behind Ryan. "If you walk out and damage this deal, Mrs. Whitmore, you may find yourself facing claims for interference." Martin's eyes sharpened. Diane turned slowly. A threat. At her son's wedding, after using her property, after showing a false signature. The old Diane might have shaken. This Diane only nodded once. "Put that in writing," she said. Charles blinked. Diane handed the microphone to Amanda, then looked at Martin. "Now I'm ready to activate Harold's clause." Ryan went completely still. Vanessa stared. Charles said, "What clause?" Diane did not answer him. She walked toward the ballroom doors with Martin and Grace beside her. Behind her, the wedding reception stood broken open under the chandeliers. In front of her, for the first time all day, was a path she had chosen. Just before she reached the hallway, Martin's phone buzzed. He glanced down, stopped walking, and looked at Diane. "The county recorder's office just confirmed something," he said. Diane felt her stomach tighten. "What?" Martin's voice dropped. "Someone attempted to file a notice of ownership transition yesterday morning." Martin kept his phone in his hand as the words settled between them. "Someone attempted to file a notice of ownership transition yesterday morning." Diane felt the hallway tilt slightly, but she did not reach for the wall. She stood in the doorway of the broken reception, with music behind her, legal papers in her bag, and the sound of her son's collapsing fantasy still echoing beneath the chandeliers. "Attempted," she said. Martin nodded. "Attempted. It was not accepted. Why?" The recorder's office flagged it because the document referenced attached consent materials, but did not include a properly notarized deed or transfer instrument. Whoever submitted it either misunderstood the process or hoped no one would look closely until later. Diane looked back into the ballroom. Ryan was still standing near Vanessa, stunned and pale. Charles Caldwell had stopped pretending he was leaving. Vanessa's face had shifted from anger to calculation again. She was watching Diane, measuring, waiting to see what Diane knew. Diane turned back to Martin. "Who filed it? I don't have the full copy yet. My contact is sending what can be released today." But the filing party was listed as Whitmore Ridge Development FLC. Grace's mouth tightened. "Ryan's LLC." Diane closed her eyes for one brief second. There were many ways for a child to hurt: harsh words, neglect, shame, silence. But paperwork had a special cruelty. It did not shout. It did not slam doors. It simply entered official records and tried to make betrayal look orderly. Ryan had not just let people talk. His company had taken steps. Maybe clumsy steps, maybe legally defective steps, but steps. Diane opened her eyes. "Then we do it now," she said. Martin studied her. "The land trust? Yes, this is not a small decision." "I know. It may permanently change Ryan's expectations." Diane looked through the open ballroom doors. Ryan was speaking now with Vanessa in urgent whispers. His hands moved helplessly, palms open, as if he were trying to hold together water. He had spent the day begging Diane not to embarrass him. He had not once asked what it felt like to see her name forged beneath a lie. "My son changed my expectations first," she said. Martin nodded slowly. Grace's expression softened, but she said nothing. That was why Diane trusted her. Grace did not fill painful moments with noise. Martin led them into a smaller conference room down the hall, away from the ballroom, but close enough that the muffled sound of arguments still followed them. Amanda arranged for the room to be empty and closed the door behind them. Diane sat at the table while Martin opened his briefcase and removed Harold's estate documents. The pages looked older under the fluorescent light. Harold's signature rested near the bottom of one section. Diane touched the margin, not the ink. She did not want to smudge even the copy. Martin turned to the land protection clause. "I want to be clear," he said. "This does not punish Ryan by itself. It does not erase him from your life. It does not decide every inheritance issue tonight. What it does is let you begin the process of moving the farm into a protected structure, preventing unauthorized sale, pledge, redevelopment, or speculative transfer without your consent and the trust's formal process." Diane listened carefully. "Will it stop them from using the farm in presentations? It gives us stronger ground to notify investors, the LLC, the venue, and any related parties that the property is not available for private development discussions. Will Ryan be able to undo it? Not unilaterally. That was enough." Diane looked at the page. For years, she had thought Harold's caution was almost excessive. He had worried about developers even when Ryan dismissed the farm as too small and too inconvenient. Harold had understood something Diane had not wanted to believe. Land could make even family impatient. "Prepare it," she said. Martin placed a short authorization form in front of her. "This authorizes me to begin the protective filing and notices. It does not transfer title tonight. That part must be handled properly, but this lets me act immediately." Diane read every line, slowly, twice. No one rushed her. No one told her she was being difficult. No one sighed as if her caution were a burden. That alone nearly broke her. When she finished, she took Martin's pen and signed her name, her real signature, steady, recognizable, hers. Martin witnessed it, Grace witnessed it. Amanda, standing by the door, did not move until Martin asked her to note the time, and she wrote it down carefully. Diane watched the ink dry. There was no thunder, no dramatic music, no applause, only a woman reclaiming the right to decide what happened to her own life. Martin scanned the authorization using a portable scanner from his briefcase and sent it to his office. Then he dictated instructions to his assistant over the phone, precise and calm. Preserve notices. Prepare investor communication. Notify county council contact. Draft cease and desist letters to Whitmore Ridge Development LLC, Ryan Whitmore, Vanessa Caldwell, and Charles Caldwell regarding unauthorized use of property name, address, signature, and ownership representations. Each phrase built a fence, not wooden wire, legal, necessary. Diane felt herself breathing easier with every word. Then someone pounded on the conference room door, not a polite knock. A demand. Amanda opened it only a few inches. Ryan stood outside. His bow tie was gone. His hair was no longer perfect. The groom from the program photographs had vanished, leaving behind a tired man with red eyes and shaking hands. I need to talk to my mother. Martin stepped toward the door. Now is not a good time. Ryan looked past him. Mom, please. Diane could have said no. Part of her wanted to. But another part understood this conversation could not be avoided forever. Let him in, she said. Martin did not look pleased, but he moved aside. Ryan entered alone. For the first time all day, Vanessa was not attached to him. That changed the room more than Diane expected. Without her voice guiding him, Ryan looked younger, smaller, less certain of himself. His eyes went to the document on the table. What did you sign? Diane folded her hands. Protection for the farm. His face tightened. What does that mean? It means Whitmore Ridge will not be used as bait for investors. Mom. It also means no one will pressure me into selling, transferring, or pretending you own what you do not. He stared at her. The words reached him slowly. You're cutting me out. No, Diane said. You stepped outside the trust when you treated my property like yours. His eyes filled again, but this time she did not let the tears pull her backward. I thought it was going to be mine someday, he said. Someday is not a deed, I know that now. You knew it before, she said quietly. You just hoped I would love you too much to enforce it. Ryan flinched. The silence that followed was heavy and honest. Diane almost wished he would deny it. Instead, he looked down. I didn't think you would fight me. There it was, the plain truth beneath every polished lie. Not that he hated her, not that he wanted to destroy her. He simply believed she would keep sacrificing because she always had. Diane felt the wound open again, but this time it did not bleed the same way, it clarified. That is why I have to, she said. Ryan wiped his face with the heel of his hand. Vanessa's father pushed hard. He said we needed momentum. He said if investors saw hesitation, everything would fall apart, and you chose momentum over truth. He nodded once, barely, but he nodded. Before Diane could answer, raised voices came from the hallway. Vanessa, then Charles, then Grant Mercer's sharper voice cutting through both. The conference room door opened again. Amanda appeared, breathless. Martin, she said, you need to see this. What happened? Amanda held up her phone. The investors found a second ledger. Ryan's face changed. Diane looked at him. He knew, maybe not all of it, but enough. Amanda swallowed. It shows another payment scheduled for tonight after the presentation. Martin took the phone and read. Diane watched his expression harden. To whom? She asked. Martin looked up. Ryan. Ryan stared at Martin as if he had misunderstood the word. To me? Martin did not answer immediately. He looked down at Amanda's phone again, then at the second ledger on the screen. The room around them seemed to grow smaller. The muffled reception noise continued outside, but inside the conference room, every breath sounded too loud. Diane held out her hand. Martin passed her the phone. The line was clear. Ryan Whitmore, succession coordination payment, $32,000 pending release after presentation. Diane read it once. Then again. The words were not complicated. They did not need legal translation. A payment had been scheduled for her son after the public presentation using her land, her name, and a signature she had never given. Ryan's face had gone pale. I didn't know it was listed like that, he said. Diane looked up slowly. That was not the same as saying he knew nothing. Martin noticed it too. What did you know? Martin asked. Ryan rubbed both hands over his face. Charles said there would be a founder allocation once the investor commitments were finalized. Diane's heart sank. Founder allocation, she repeated. Ryan looked at her, ashamed. That's what he called it. And what did you think you founded? He had no answer. Diane waited, but silence did not save him. It only showed the shape of the truth. He had founded a company with her farm's name. He had let Vanessa dress it up in lies. He had allowed investors to believe he stood at the edge of ownership. He may not have created every false document, but he had accepted the benefits of the story. Ryan's voice dropped. I thought once you understood the opportunity, you'd agree. No, Diane said. You thought if everyone else believed it first, I would be too cornered to refuse. His eyes filled. He looked toward Martin, then Grace, then Amanda, as if someone in the room might soften the sentence. No one did. The door opened behind them. Vanessa stepped in without knocking, followed by Charles Caldwell. Her face was flushed beneath her makeup, but her posture was still rigid with pride. Charles looked less polished now. His tie had loosened and anger had replaced charm. You need to stop talking without counsel, Charles snapped at Ryan. Ryan turned on him. You told me this was standard. Charles's eyes narrowed. It was standard until your mother decided to sabotage her own family. Diane stood. The chair scraped against the floor. She did not sabotage anything, Martin said. Charles ignored him and looked directly at Diane. Do you understand what you are doing? You are destroying your son's future over paperwork. Diane felt the old pressure again, the familiar burden of being expected to absorb harm because refusing would make her cruel. But she was done carrying responsibility for other people's choices. My son's future was never yours to build with my land, she said. Vanessa laughed sharply. Your land, that is all you keep saying. You act like Ryan is a stranger. Diane turned to her. He acted like I was dead. The room went still. Ryan flinched. Diane did not regret the words. You wrote me out of a wedding program while putting me into a business presentation, she continued. You removed me as a mother but used me as an owner. That is not family. That is extraction. Vanessa's mouth opened but nothing came out. Grace quietly stepped beside Diane and placed the printed ledger on the table. We should preserve this in hard copy. Martin nodded. Amanda, can you confirm where this ledger came from? Amanda swallowed. The investor relations folder. It was in the packet prepared for Mr. Caldwell's table. Charles's face hardened. That was not meant for general review. That is usually the problem with evidence, Martin said. It becomes inconvenient when people read it. Ryan sank into a chair. For the first time that day, he looked completely defeated. Diane could have mistaken that defeat for remorse if she had wanted to. But she no longer wanted illusions. She wanted truth, even ugly truth. Martin turned to Charles. The protective notices are being drafted now. Any attempted filing related to ownership to transition will be formally challenged. Any use of Mrs. Whitmore's name, address, signature, or property in connection with Whitmore Ridge development must stop immediately. Charles gave him a cold smile. You are overreaching. No, Martin said. You overreached when you used a forged acknowledgement. Vanessa's head snapped up. Nobody forged anything. Ryan looked at her. That one look said enough. Vanessa saw it and pointed at him. Do not put this on me. You gave me access to the files. You told me your mother never read anything all the way through. Diane closed her eyes for 1 second. Not from surprise, from pain. Ryan had said that. She knew he had, because it sounded like him on his worst days. Impatient, dismissive. Convinced her caution was inconvenience and her trust was something to maneuver around. When she opened her eyes, Ryan was crying silently. Mom, he whispered. Diane shook her head once. Not now. She could not mother him through the consequences of wounding her. Not while the wound was still open. The hallway outside grew louder. Investors had gathered near the conference room and several guests lingered behind them. The reception had fully collapsed into clusters of confusion and whispered judgment. No one was dancing. No one was eating. The flowers and candles looked ridiculous now, staged beauty around exposed rot. Grant Mercer appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, we are requesting written confirmation from your counsel that no investor funds should be released or relied upon until ownership authority is verified. You'll have it, Martin said. Grant nodded. His eyes moved to Charles, and we will be requesting immediate return of all preliminary funds. Charles looked as though he wanted to argue, but too many people were watching. Diane understood the shift. Charles still had confidence in private. He did not have it in a room full of investors holding documents. Martin's phone buzzed again. He checked it, then looked at Diane. My assistant has prepared the initial protective notice. Diane nodded. Send it. Once it goes out, it goes to the LLC, the listed business address, Ryan, Vanessa, Charles, and the known investor contacts. Send it. Ryan lifted his head. Mom, please. Diane looked at him. Please what? He swallowed. Don't make it worse. There it was again. Even now. Not fix what I did. Not I am sorry for using you. Just don't make it worse. Diane's voice was soft when she answered. I am making it honest. Martin pressed send. No sound followed. No dramatic announcement. But Diane felt the moment pass through the room anyway. A legal line had been drawn. The farm was no longer unguarded. The lie was no longer uncontested. Vanessa grabbed her father's arm. Do something. Charles whispered back, but Diane heard part of it. "We need the account frozen before they trace the withdrawals." Grace's head snapped toward him. Martin looked up. Charles realized too late that he had spoken too loudly. Diane felt her pulse slow, not race, slow, because the next piece had just revealed itself. Withdrawals, not just payments, not just pending transfers. Money had already been moved somewhere they did not want found. Grace pulled out her phone immediately. "Martin, I'm calling the bank contact now." Charles stepped forward. "You have no authority." Diane faced him. "She doesn't," Diane said. "But I do have authority over my name, my address, and my property, and you used all three." Her phone buzzed in her hand. A new email from Grace's banking contact arrived faster than expected, forwarded through Grace. Subject: Urgent Whitmore Ridge Development Account Activity. Diane opened it. The message contained only a preliminary note and a warning that formal records would require proper authorization, but one line was visible in the preview. Multiple transfers initiated this morning to Caldwell Holdings and R. Whitmore Personal Checking. Diane read the preview twice before handing the phone to Martin. Multiple transfers initiated this morning to Caldwell Holdings and R. Whitmore Personal Checking. Ryan saw the words over Martin's shoulder and went ashen. "I didn't know it was today," he whispered. Diane looked at him. "But you knew there would be money." His silence answered. Grace stepped into the hallway to call the bank contact again. Martin began giving instructions in a low, firm voice, asking that all available account activity be preserved and that no one destroy communications related to Whitmore Ridge development. Nothing happened instantly. No officer rushed through the ballroom. No judge appeared with a final order. Real consequences did not arrive like thunder. They arrived through forms, notices, account holds, demand letters, and people suddenly afraid to answer simple questions. By the end of that night, the reception was over in every way that mattered. Guests left in uneasy clusters. Investors took their packets with them. Amanda preserved the slideshow files, program drafts, seating notes, and ledgers. Martin sent formal notices before midnight. Grace documented the transfers and began tracing what records she could legally access. The county recorder's office confirmed the attempted transition filing had been rejected, but the attempt itself became part of the file. Ryan did not leave with Vanessa. That was not a romantic ending or a moral victory. It was only another collapse. Vanessa left with her father through a side entrance after Grant Mercer demanded written repayment terms. By morning, 3 investor groups had requested documentation. Within a week, Caldwell Holdings received formal claims. Vanessa's reputation among the very people she had tried to impress did not survive the first round of forwarded emails. Ryan called Diane 7 times that first night. She did not answer. Not because she wanted him to suffer, because she finally understood that every time she answered too quickly, he learned that consequences were temporary, or the protective filings took time. Martin did everything properly. The farm did not magically change hands overnight. Diane signed only what she fully understood. She met with Martin twice, Grace 3 times, and the banks. Her original deed remained locked away. The land protection process began, and formal notices went out to every known party stating that no one except Diane had authority to sell, transfer, pledge, develop, or represent Whitmore Ridge Farm. The bank froze reviewable movement from the development account pending proper documentation and disputes from investors. The transfers to Caldwell Holdings and Ryan's personal account did not disappear. They sat there in records, ugly and traceable. Ryan was required to explain what he received and why. Vanessa and Charles had to answer for the consulting fee, the promotional charges, the wedding expenses, and the use of Diane's name. Diane did not ask Martin to destroy them. She asked him to protect her. That difference mattered to her. 3 weeks later, Ryan came to the farm gate. Diane saw his car from the kitchen window. He did not drive through. He could not. She had changed the gate code after the wedding, and for the first time in his adult life, Ryan could not enter his mother's land simply because he wanted to. He stood outside the gate wearing jeans and a plain gray shirt. No tuxedo, no polished watch, no Vanessa. Diane watched him for several minutes before walking down the gravel drive. She did not open the gate. Ryan gripped the metal bars with both hands. He looked thinner, tired, older in a way that had nothing to do with age. "Mom," he said. Diane stopped on her side of the gate. "Ryan," he swallowed hard. "Thank you for coming down. I haven't decided how long I'm staying." He nodded as if he deserved that. For a while, neither of them spoke. The horses grazed in the pasture behind Diane. A light wind moved across the grass. It was the kind of morning Harold would have loved, cool and clear, with work waiting and no need for speeches. Ryan looked past her toward the barn. I used to hate how this place made me feel. Diane said nothing. I know that sounds awful. It does. He flinched but continued. Vanessa made me feel like I could become someone else. Someone important. Someone people respected. Diane's voice stayed quiet, and I reminded you where you came from. He nodded, tears already forming. Yes. The honesty hurt, but it was better than another excuse. I was ashamed, he said, of the farm, of the mud, of the way people looked at us. Vanessa talked about her family. I let her turn that shame into a plan. She did not create your shame, Diane said. Ryan looked down. She used it, Diane continued. But it was yours. He pressed his forehead against the gate for a moment. I know, Diane waited. I didn't forge your signature, he said, but I saw it. I knew it was wrong. I told myself it was just a draft because that was easier than stopping it. Diane felt the old mother's pain rise again, the desire to comfort him, to say he was still good, to say they would fix everything. She did not. What you called easier nearly cost me my farm. I know, he whispered. No, Ryan, you are beginning to know. That is not the same thing. He wiped his face. Martin said I have to return the money, yes, and cooperate with the document review, yes. Vanessa's father is blaming me. That may be his choice. Your choices are still yours. He nodded shakily. Will you help me? Diane looked at her son through the gate. There was the question she had known would come. Not forgiveness. She loved him. That was the cruelest part. Love had not vanished when trust broke. It remained wounded and watchful, refusing to be confused with surrender. No, she said. Ryan closed his eyes. I will not pay your lawyer. I will not cover what you owe. I will not ask Martin to soften anything to protect you from embarrassment. You will tell the truth. You will return what was taken. You will face whatever comes next. His shoulders shook. But I'm still your son. Yes, Diane said, and her voice broke slightly. And I am still a person. That silenced him completely. Diane looked back at the farm. The fences were straight. The barn needed paint. The east pasture needed reseeding. The place was not glamorous, and it had never needed to be. It was honest. It had survived storms, debt, grief, and now greed dressed up as vision. I am starting a program here, she said. Ryan looked up. For adults who want to learn horsemanship, stable work, and farm management. People changing careers. People who want honest work with their hands. His face twisted with regret. Dad would have liked that. Yes, Diane said. He would have. Can I help? Not now. He nodded as if each word cost him. Maybe someday, she added. If you become someone who understands service without ownership. Ryan cried then quietly and without performance. Diane let him cry. She'd not open the gate. Months later, Whitmore Ridge remained Diane's. The land trust process moved forward. The investors pursued repayment through proper channels. Vanessa and Charles lost the polished circle they had tried so hard to impress. Ryan worked through lawyers, statements, repayments, and the long humiliation of being known by his choices instead of his image. Diane kept living. She opened the farm program in early spring with 6 adult students, all old enough to have known disappointment and still young enough to begin again. On the first morning, she stood beside the training ring in her boots and watched them learn how to lead a horse without fear or force. It felt like peace. Not soft peace, earned peace. That evening, Diane walked to the gate and checked the lock before sunset. For years, that gate had kept horses in. Now it reminded her that boundaries could protect people too. She looked across the pasture and thought of Ryan. She had not stopped loving him. She had simply stopped confusing love with rescue. Then she turned back toward the barn where the lights were warm and the work was hers. If your own child banned you from their wedding because they were ashamed of where they came from, would you forgive them or would you protect your peace first?